Committee Room 21. Sound.
All right, Damien, thanks. Okay, members, just to remind you, the meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. Continue to remind you of the enhanced audio and video equipment in committee rooms, and side conversations are likely to be picked up by microphones. Nobody for the public gallery. Okay. Any further declaration of interest, members?
Nope.
No. Okay. Any apologies? No. No apologies. Draft minutes, members. The minutes of the meeting of the 9th of May is in the pack, pages 4 to 14. Are there any comments, or are you content to assign them?
10.
Thank you. Okay, Chair's business. Just want to highlight that the Deputy Chair and myself received an invitation to the ministerial address between 11 a.m. and 11:45 at the Royal Ulster Agriculture Show in the private meeting rooms at Balmoral Show today. I attended the show yesterday in a personal capacity, so I declined the invitation in order to chair today's meeting. I don't know whether the Deputy Chair is planning to be there or not.
I don't think it'll be possible given that the time it is now. I was there myself yesterday as well, and later on today.
Okay, thanks, Director. Matters arising. Sorry, members. Matters arising. Refer you to pages 16 to 41 of the pack for the detailed response from the Department dated 8th of May 2024 in reply to our letter of the 19th of April regarding Moboy illegal waste site. Members, I don't want to use a bit of chance to fully go through that. There's quite a bit of detail in it from the Department on the matter of Moboy. So I do note that the response highlights that the business case for Moboy remediation project is currently under development and no decision has yet been reached on how to proceed. Department states that it is firmly committed to pursuing enforcement action against the former operators of the site and believes that every possible step should be taken before alternative funding is sought to meet the costs of the remediation. Next step is a public consultation on the draft remediation strategy, but there is no agreed preferred option and there will not be until consultation has been completed. Members, have you any comments on that document, or do you want to take any further action at this stage? I know at the end of today we're talking about our strategic planning day and what further discussions we might have, so maybe if we want an oral briefing from the department we can discuss it at that if you're content enough. All right, thank you. Next matter arising that I have is page 4 of the table papers, dated 14th of May 2024 regarding a forthcoming review in May and June of the Tackling Rural Poverty and Social Isolation, that's the TRIPSI framework. Since 2016 it has supported measures to help address the effects of financial poverty, access poverty and social isolation in rural areas. You content to note that at this stage there's not a great deal further we can do. Anyway.
We'll hear more, yeah.
Sorry, John?
Until we hear more.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Matters arising, pages 6 to 7 of the table papers. Department's response to our letter of the 12th of April 2024 regarding dairy input to the consultation on the proposed EU regulation on the protection of animals during transport and progression of the new regulation in Europe. The Department has apologised for the delay in responding or forwarding a response. Members, this is something, there is UK legislation on the transport of animals, but there is also, I understood, an EU consultation recently. So it does appear that the department didn't make any response to that consultation. They did say it was for stakeholders. I'm not sure maybe if they don't regard themselves as stakeholders. I'm just not sure in that respect, or why they didn't make any response. Any further comment on that? No? Okay. Okay, agenda item 5. Sorry, members, were there any other matters arising that any of you have? No? Thank you. Okay, agenda item 5 is briefing from the Nature Friendly Farming Network, if they're here.
Chair, will we talk in relation to the issue that was raised this week with the Minister with regards to diseases and how they're going to be treated by the department? Will we talk about that later in the meeting?
Yeah, I'm assuming that's you're saying with the powers that are withheld within the Secretary of State. Yeah, there is correspondence coming up about that, so we'll be dealing with that later, Michelle.
Okay.
We're on to 5 now. I'm from Nature Friendly Farmer.
Okay, good morning. Folks, you're all very welcome here. Michael McCarg, Phil Carson, Cormac Dolan and Louise Skelly. You're all very welcome.
I'm replacing Michael. I'm Tim Morrow. So just
right, Tim. Right. Well, look, thank you very much. We got your presentations and your briefings, so we appreciate that. Thank you for that. So we'll ask you to give us about 5 to 10 minutes of a brief, and hopefully you'll be open for questions.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. I'll continue on from that then. I'm Phil Carson, so I'm the UK Head of Policy for the Nature Friendly Farming Network, and to set the context a little bit, we are an independent farmer-led membership organisation which seeks to support farmers every stage of their journey towards nature-friendly farming. Our vision is a future where farmers are empowered to put nature at the heart of their businesses, supported by policies that enable and drive this transition. In Northern Ireland, members are represented by a steering group from farmers across a range of the main sectors, and I'm joined with 2 of those steering group members today. And in terms of our brief and I suppose the challenges that we're facing, farming and agriculture land management in Northern Ireland is navigating a range of different issues and challenges. From extreme and volatile weather, we've had one of the wettest years on record, we've had exceptionally high rainfall, but we've also seen really, really extreme temperatures. We've seen high input costs, which are having an impact on farm profit margins as well. And we're also seeing biodiversity loss as well, which is having an impact in terms of a range of different ecosystems services that they can provide to farms as well. And this is important because during the time the Assembly was not sitting, there was a range of different policies and I suppose different measures that were delayed during that period of suspension, which would play a role in helping farming to kind of build its resilience to some of those challenges. So we really welcome the return of the Assembly and have a number of, I suppose, priorities that we want to see delivered over the course of the following mandate. So with over 75% of Northern Ireland's land dedicated to agriculture, how we farm and manage that can have a significant impact on the delivery of a range of important public policy objectives. So that includes sustainable food production, climate mitigation and adaptation, water quality improvement, and of course biodiversity recovery as well. And although these objectives are often viewed through the lens of, I suppose, hard decisions and trade-offs, there are ways in which we can deliver all of them together and in tandem. And strategies that focus on building agricultural resilience through a nature-friendly approach are actually key in supporting food production and long-term food security as well. And this is becoming increasingly important as the impacts of biodiversity loss and climate change are bringing those challenges to the agricultural sector. So I've mentioned some of these before, but we had the warmest year ever recorded last year. We had 21% higher rainfall than average, and every sector is struggling to deal with these challenges, and these are only going to increase as the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss continue over the following years. For example, the most recent State of Nature report showed that 12% of species are at risk of extinction in Northern Ireland. In particular, farming birds have declined by 43% since 1996, and a range of our priority habitats are suffering from the impacts of air pollution and things like that as well. So we have a range of different challenges that we have to try and address. Agriculture is key in doing that, and in doing that we can deliver more resilient, more productive and sustainable businesses at the same time. But policy is going to be absolutely crucial in achieving those objectives. So the Department's future farming policy portfolio will be vital in supporting a transition to a range of different farming practices which address these challenges, safeguarding long-term food production and building resilience within farming systems. And within this, the eagerly awaited Farming with Nature package is absolutely integral and is crucial. And these will provide support for a range of schemes for farmers to upscale environmental action across their farms and build business resilience and support sustainable food production, as well as delivering on our statutory nature and climate commitments. So as an organisation, we support the overarching ambition of the future farming policy framework to deliver a Farming with Nature package which forms the central plank of agricultural support. And we also commend the work of departmental officials in developing the broad parameters of these schemes which will sit within the package. And it is our understanding that some of these will be piloted this year. However, from our perspective, there are several missing parts of the puzzle which need to be filled with urgency. And these are crucial in providing that long-term direction for farmers and providing a direction of travel which helps farmers plan for the future and understand what will be required of them. And these centre on a number of, I suppose, concerns. These are under the absence of a detailed timeline. So at the moment we have an indication of what schemes will be in place up to 2026, but beyond that we're missing in terms of detail, which is bringing challenges for farmers to plan in the long term. A second challenge is that there's no clarity on budgetary allocations between different schemes within the portfolio itself. And this is, I suppose, runs contrast to other parts of the UK and also the European Union as well, where there's clarity in terms of how budget is going to be allocated between different schemes. This is important, I suppose, in terms of helping farmers plan, also in terms of assessing whether these policies are actually going to deliver on our statutory obligations as well. The third point is that there's a lack of clear and measurable objectives within the scheme as well. So what is it trying to deliver and when? And these need to be smart, so they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timely as well. And the other element within this, which is a cause for concern, is the transition from current policy arrangements to future ones. So we've been told that Farming with Nature is going to be a key element of future agricultural support. But at the same time, we are seeing the withdrawal of current agricultural funding for environmental land management. And in particular, we've seen the removal of the EFS wider scheme. And that leaves up to 4,000 farmers who've invested significant time and financial resource in delivering these sorts of schemes without a viable pathway to something until 2026 at the earliest, we're told. And then finally, we have concerns around a general or a lack of coherence between different policies and packages within the scheme itself. So we do have a beef carbon reduction scheme, we do have a soil nutrient health scheme. These have all been delivered at pace and are operational or close to being operational. And we have Farming with Nature coming behind that. And we do believe that there are some risks that these aren't as joined up as they could be and as synergistic as they could be, particularly with a focus on, I suppose, carbon emissions and reducing those, potentially at the risk of biodiversity gain within that too. So those are a range of things that we want to see addressed over the coming years. And to do that, we also need to see action on the supply chain and on trade. Those are reserved areas, but they're also integral in terms of delivering the sustainable future for farming that we want to see. So from our perspective, in terms of what needs to be done to address some of these challenges, we have a number of key asks, and the first of those is the publication of an ambitious agriculture bill to be put in place by the end of this Assembly mandate. That would be crucial in providing the direction of travel for agriculture, but also providing the legal basis for future payments, and also providing a real clear purpose of what agriculture policy is trying to achieve. Alongside that, we'd want to see the publication of a transition plan which clearly outlines what is expected of farmers between now and 2030, and this will be really key in terms of allocating budget but also helping farmers to understand what will be asked of them. We want to see the swift rollout of Farming with Nature test and learn pilots, so we do have a commitment from the department to roll out a series of test and learn schemes which will help to inform the design of the Farming with Nature schemes whenever they're fully operational. We need to see those rolled out as quickly quickly as possible. Those are essentially going to test what's effective and what's not. We want to see smart objectives for the Farming with Nature package, so what outcomes achieved over what time frame, what level of woodland cover, for example, is the scheme going to try and achieve, what level of greenhouse gas emissions is it going to try and reduce. All those sorts of things need to be laid out and to be very clear to understand how public money is being used to deliver these outcomes. We also need to see adequate resourcing for the scheme itself. So this is going to be a big transition to an old system of farm support to a new one, and we want to have confidence that the internal resourcing within the department is effective in ensuring that it is rolled out at the scale it needs to be to overcome some of the challenges I mentioned before. And then beyond that, some of the elements around trade and supply chain reform, we also want to see pressure being exerted onto the UK government to influence those areas, because without that, we risk having a lot of good stuff being delivered in terms of agriculture policy domestically, which is undone by a trade policy which isn't coherent with that, and a supply chain which isn't paying fairly for the private goods that are being produced on farmland as well. So that is a very quick overview of our priorities, I suppose some of the challenges that we need to see addressed through future agriculture policy, and would welcome your questions after that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil, for that summary. Just to ask, I noticed at the bottom of your first page, I think it is, second page of the briefing you sent us. We're also concerned that an overriding focus on efficiency improvements could undermine the delivery of biodiversity recovery or disadvantage farm businesses in certain landscapes, and you seem to be critical of the beef carbon reduction scheme. So are you saying here that two different sectors, which really seems to be improvements to agriculture in both sectors, efficiency improvements and biodiversity recovery, aren't sitting side by side or aren't working well side by side?
The point it's a good point in that sense. There are opportunities to kind of join biodiversity recovery and climate action together very, very strongly, and to have them working hand in hand, but there are sometimes risks associated with focusing on one measure of success which could undermine others. And in specific reference to that scheme itself, it's very much focused on reducing methane emissions through putting animals through the system quicker. And what we have found through a piece of work that we delivered, where we carbon audited 35 farms in Northern Ireland, was that farm systems in less favoured areas, for example, performed quite poorly in terms of greenhouse gas emissions per unit of output. So the cattle, whenever they're measured in a certain way, were less efficient and less productive. But in many instances, they were providing quite an important service in terms of managing specific habitats, so priority grasslands, things like that, which need to be managed in a particular way. And our concern would be that a narrow focus, which just looked at methane emissions alone, could disadvantage those systems, for example. So what we need is something that is joined up and all schemes to be operating at the same time. So if you are a system that is, I suppose, unable to achieve those levels of productivity improvements, you have something to do. The other element within that as well, with the beef carbon reduction scheme, is a question of whether a payment is the most effective way to do that, and whether there's a greater role for knowledge exchange potentially to do that, because there is going to be an economic benefit for those businesses that are able to kind of finish animals quicker through changes in practice. So there's a question around value for money as well, in terms of up to £50 million being spent.
Sorry, is there evidence to demonstrate that it is more efficient and more profitable to finish cattle earlier? Because as a beef farmer myself, there are some instances in which if you try to finish beef at 24 months, there's a huge amount of inputs in concentrate levels in particular, and we're by the more extensive methods of finishing them maybe don't require that, and while you don't finish them as quick, there's less inputs.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and it's that kind of idea of a one-size-fits-all, which is quite crude, could result in unintended consequences. So there are examples of certain systems finishing animals within 24 months solely on grass, but that is very much based on the genetics of the animal, the landscape, all that sort of stuff. And in many cases, it is an increase in input to do that, which can be costly. I'll let Louise come in because you have some points on that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Louise Skelly. I'm a sheep farmer from Catesbridge in County Down. And 2 years ago, I was one of the 17 farms which was part of the Nature Friendly Farming funded project, which was actually funded by DERA to look at maximum sustainable output. And I think it would be good if the committee could revisit that report. And what it showed was that each farm, a bit like what you've said, each farm there is a sweet spot in terms of being able to produce your livestock based on the natural resources on your farm, whether that's grass, sunlight, rain, all of that, and reducing your inputs in terms of fertiliser, pesticides and concentrates. In actual fact, if the farm can use all of the management information to try to find where is the sweet spot on that farm, you then end up making more money. And it's actually a more profitable farm and more sustainable in the long term. And that was a very good very good exercise for us as a farm. It changed our practice on the farm. I reduced my stock last year by 20% based on data, and I'm gradually working to find the balance on our own farm in terms of how we can produce stuff using the resources we have naturally without buying in expensive inputs. And actually trying to see where is the best balance on the farm in terms of inputs and outputs, and how we can actually make a better profit margin. So that was a really useful exercise for us practically, and I think your point is very well made about expensive inputs.
So tell me, in relation to your organisation, how do you sit with the intensive sector? The farmer that has maybe 400 dairy cows that are housed 365 days of the year, or the intensive poultry sector, or the intensive pig sector, where do you sit in relation to those? Because obviously someone who has 300 dairy cows is housed all year round, I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, doesn't sit extremely well with your view on agriculture?
I think from our perspective, it's a case that every single farm, regardless of what type of system they have, can do something, and some are going to have to, I suppose, go further along the journey to kind of deliver some of the things that we're talking about. But there are good examples of quite high output systems that are able to do good things for nature, good things for climate, good things for the environment more generally. And there's a question here, I think, with the whole point around input usage and energy usage. And we are in a rapidly warming world, and we are seeing, I suppose, the impacts globally on food production from climate change. We are seeing governments putting a lot of pressure on industries to reduce their emissions, to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels, for example. And there's a question of the long-term sustainability of certain sectors that are reliant on that level of input usage over the next few decades. So I think there's no argument that there is a need for quite transformational change across the piece to address some of those challenges. And it's just how we produce or kind of create strategies which support farmers to do that, because it's not something that's going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen without a clear kind of plan and a so-called just transition as well. So that's generally our position on that. But I suppose, Tim, would you want to come in terms of any experience that you have in terms of change, or from the dairy sector more generally as well?
To get back on your point, Mr. Elliott, I sat on a steering group just a book last year on how to basically give a suite of options for all dairy farmers, no matter what their systems. So we had 4 systems: totally enclosed, partially enclosed, and spring calving all out. I'm one of the spring calving all out guys, and I live 2 miles from here. And it's been a difficult year for everybody in terms of weather. But there are things that any farmer can do we went to a totally enclosed, as I would call him, farmer, dairy farmer, and he has planted, a couple of acres of woodland, native woodland. His hedges are fantastic. You get no benefit in any of the calculations from any of your hedges or all woodlands. You're not given anything for how much carbon you sequester on the farm. The way these things are calculated at the minute are laughable, in my opinion. But anyway, we're changing the way we farm a bit. We've gone down a third in our fertiliser use in the last 4 years because we're transitioning to herbal lays. That's something that anybody can do, whether you're cutting it for silage or putting cows out to graze. We're putting in a red clover mix this year. None of those fields that we've changed are getting any fertiliser whatsoever, and on average they're growing 5% less. So no fertiliser versus 5%. That's a win-win for me as a farmer. So I'm not trying to produce less grass or less food. I'm trying to do it more efficiently. I'm trying to do it with biodiversity in mind, because everything starts from the soil. And we all know, everybody knows, putting fertiliser in the ground kills soil. So I've been doing that for years, and I want to try and change that. I want to try and increase the biodiversity on our farm by implementing small changes. And one of the things that farmers need, as you would know, being a farmer, is we need direction of travel. We need to be told this is what's coming down the line. And we as farmers, I had a meeting with Dale Farm there a few months ago, and they were explaining to their farmers that this is coming down the line, and it's not us telling you this to do, it is the people buying our milk are telling us this is what you need to do. So we all need, this is happening whether Dale Farm want it or any other buying group want it. The people that are buying milk off them are saying, you need to be able to tick these boxes. What are you doing for regeneration? What are you doing for biodiversity? All these boxes need to be ticked in the future. And I think as farmers, all we want to know is this is the direction of travel. You have to start going this way. And you know what farmers are like? They won't start going that way unless they're actually forced to do it or given a carrot to do it.
It's a significant reduction in inputs from
Yes.
your perspective. Have you a significantly reduced herd in numbers?
No. Well, 5%
right.
less grass, there's 5% less cows.
Okay.
But they're doing it more efficiently because there's no input. So for me, it's a break-even scenario. I wouldn't say I'm making any more money out of it, but I'm not losing money out of it, and I can see far more life on the farm. We now have wild hares back on the farm again that we hadn't seen in 30 years, which is just beautiful to see.
I can import you some.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, can I just add to that? When soil is healthy on any farm, it produces more food and nutrition. And as a sheep farmer, I'm quite concerned about the fact that we really need to get our policy around farming with nature correct, because the market is changing. A lot of the lamb from Northern Ireland is exported to the UK and to the supermarkets in the UK. And on the 8th of May this year, Waitrose announced that they are, and I'll quote, they are only going to source UK meat, milk, eggs, fruit and vegetables for farms that use regenerative practices from 2035. And they're starting to work with 2,000 farmers to put that in. Marks and Spencer's also are leading the way in terms of a select group of farmers that they're working with to looking at the quality of habitat and wildlife on the farms. So, and that's just two examples of the big supermarkets that where we export into, and I'm sure the others are going down the line.
I really appreciate that, Louise. The problem is, though, some other supermarkets are importing products from other countries that do not have the same welfare or environmental standards as we have.
The public is going to ask for it, Mr. Chairman.
The public I have seen by and large, and some of them will do that. I totally accept that, but some of them will go for the cheapest version that they can get in the supermarkets, and that's the difficulty sometimes we have, is striking that balance. But I do appreciate your the thoughts on that, and if they would all do that, I think we'd be in a much better place, to be fair.
But I think the fact that a significant portion of the market is going down that road needs to be taken into consideration with our strategies here in Northern Ireland, that we're not left behind the curve.
I'd just like to come in on that point because, completely agree. And I suppose our vision for the future in terms of an agriculture policy that pays properly for public goods and helps to support farmers on that transition is really key. We did make the point in the briefing that there's also a need for, I suppose, a coherent trade strategy and core trade standards which, create an area of kind of equivalence with domestic standards as well. And we haven't seen that with, I suppose, Australia trade deal, things like that. So obviously it's the reserve policy area, but that kind of pressure on the UK government to adopt those, and there is a big argument, I suppose, being made at that level for that.
Okay, Declan.
Thank you, and I welcome your presentation, and it's very refreshing to hear. And I think that what you demonstrate is that that not only should the environment and agriculture not be in competition, you actually are demonstrating how they complement one another. It's just on the topic of the soil, and you'll be aware, Michael, that the soil sampling has been carried right across the north here. Obviously, this is something that you've been at for a while. So maybe could you just describe a wee bit more about, would you sample your soil frequently, and how have you adjusted your inputs based on the sampling that you would have carried out over the years?
Yeah, we've been soil sampling for years and years, long before it became sort of compulsory, but I really welcome that scheme. I think it's great that people have now more knowledge of where they actually are, because you have no idea. If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going to go. So you have to have the knowledge. So we've been soil sampling, and with that soil sampling, it enables you to see any deficiencies that you have. Like, for instance, this area we're in here is really deficient in selenium. Quite often deficient in copper and iodine as well. But we have known that, so we have a mineral input system that goes into the water supply for the cows, so as they're not low and that sort of thing. So it just gives you the ability to know where you are. pH is the most important thing in soil, as everybody knows as well. If you have a very low pH, then you might as well throw the nitrogen in the river, because the soil is not going to make the efficient use of that if your pH isn't right. So you have to keep your pH right as well. So those are the sort of decisions that we have. In terms of the strategy, I'm sort of on a year 4 of a 10-year strategy, trying to get all of my farm to a no nitrogen farm. But that does not mean I want to go down to half the cows I have. I want to keep almost the same number of cows producing milk off a very efficient bit of ground. That's carbon has increased over the last 10 years because it's putting it all down there with the legumes and the clover, so as the grass can grow from it. So it's just a different way of looking at it. And as I say, we're putting in a red clover mix for silage this year, which will have white clover in it, so we'll get 2 or 3 years out of the red clover. After it's finished, the white clover will take over and it will grow a grass sward on its own again. So these strategies, I mean, one thing I don't want you to think we're doing is farmer bashing here, because I'm a farmer. I know the pressures that we're all under financially, and I actually see this as a way out of the problem. You know, who the hell wants to spend money, throwing away nitrogen if you can actually grow on your own without the blooming nitrogen? And we'd all know the prices went up to nearly £1,000 a tonne 2 years ago. And it's back down again now, but it's a product of oil, so it's going to be up and down like a yo-yo. And if we're all wanting to get away from using fossil fuels, this is a way that farmers can do it as well.
And just this is last week, not on, Minister. I'll give you an elevation there, so I didn't talk. Thank you, Chair. Just then, in terms of your inputs, obviously, would you use like lime or protected urea, or what do you use when you do need to fertilise your grass? And also, do you think that what you're doing in the soil sampling scheme we've seen across the north could maybe address some of maybe the issues that we're looking at, for example, in Lough Neagh?
Yes, I think absolutely it would be a major help in that area. Again, I don't want to be pointing a finger at any group of farmers saying you're all bad people over there, because they're not. I don't know a farmer who doesn't live the land they farm, so I don't want anyone to think I'm doing that here. But I'm just giving you my experience. My experience is the land that I have reseeded into herbalised gets no fertiliser. The other land, which is just grass, needs fertiliser, so I'm putting it on. So I'm still treating the grasslands that I have as I would normally, but I'm trying to switch those over a 10-year period too. So I'm reseeding about 30 acres a year. So
I would just like to come in a couple of additional points to that question, and I think Tim's point in terms of the financials around it. So there's a bit of research which shows that the average farm across the UK loses around £4,000 per year in kind of lost nitrogen resources. So there's a fair bit of financial loss associated with the current system of doing things. And I think Soil Nutrient Health Scheme can definitely play a role in trying to address that. We fully support that scheme, and we think it can deliver quite significant benefits. I think there's room to kind of build on it as well. So it looks very much in terms of nutrient management, and it looks very much in terms of P's and K's, organic carbon, things like that. There are more comprehensive approaches to soil testing, which look at soil structure, biology, all those sorts of things, which are also really important barometers of soil health. And if those were added in, I think would be really, really valuable to the scheme too.
Perhaps I could add to that. On our farm, we're again, we're a couple of years behind Tim, and we're working towards improving the soil quality. The Soil Nutrient Health Scheme has been really helpful in that. And we're using alternatives to fertilisers such as boron and humates as well. And we have introduced white clover into the grass for the sheep and all of that, with a view to moving towards virtually no fertiliser as well, and that has been really helpful for us. So there are, when we use organic matter, like we're putting bacteria into imported slurry and stuff like that, with a view to really working with nature and working with the soil and improving the whole soil quality. And we have limed the farm as well, Declan. So and that has really, in the results that we've got back this time, and we see the results of that, and that is actually making us more efficient.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. John Blair.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you all, by the way, and thanks for the presentation and the answers so far. A couple of things I want to raise, or possibly three. The first one is the sort of education piece around all this, both for your own members and customers and the wider public and the department. And it's the issue of climate. Surely, and I know you addressed some of this in your previous striking the balance report, where less inputs, better outputs kind of based studies, is surely the case that where we have complaints, and all of us have complained about an increase of the impacts of adverse weather conditions directly related to climate, then the lesson has to be we're doing this because we're being flooded, the rain is impacting our outputs, etc., and trying to remove the lame excuse of some, and admittedly only some, that there's somebody in the far end of the world not doing it, so I don't want to do it either. Is there more help required with that education piece for yourselves and your members, basically, from the department and the executive?
Absolutely, and one of the things that was most helpful to us on the farm was some of the courses which the Nature Friendly Farming Network ran over the last couple of years, where we got a real understanding of the importance of soil biology, bacteria, fungi, all of that. That is not widely taught within farming, and that was really helpful, and that has been a game changer actually on our farm, and also learning from the other farms like Tim, who've been in this process longer than that. So that cross fertilisation of good practice is really, really important, and it certainly has made a huge difference for us.
Yep. Just to add on that, John, I think there's the education piece. There's also the communication piece, and quite often we see the potential negatives or the trade-offs or the compromises of doing a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, and I think the likes of Tim, the likes of Louise are proving that that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, and you can do this stuff and be more profitable as a result. And I think a lot of that is around the kind of framing and how we communicate some of the strategies that need to be put in place, and trying to dispel that kind of tension between food production and nature-friendly farming, because you can deliver high output in ways which reduce your costs and reduce your inputs as well. So I think that's really key. I think the other element within this, which is really crucial, is investment in, I suppose, quite a strategic programme of knowledge exchange. there's some farmers who are doing absolutely amazing work and are seeing the benefits and the results of it and are really, really good communicators. And I think the best way to kind of affect change is to give them, I suppose, a profile and an opportunity to do that. Yeah. And whether that's something that can be built into the future agriculture policy or should be built in. And I know DARE are looking at knowledge exchange and knowledge transfer, but for us, I think something like that, which provides that platform for those farmers, would be really important.
If I could add one other thing, just we were talking about the weather and stuff. I mean, the last 18 months has been, I've been farming 40 years or more, 44 years. So it's the worst weather I ever remember. We farm in a system where when we calve cows, they go out to the field. They've been out in like yo-yos, trying to out for 3 hours, trying to not wreck the ground, back in again. It's been a nightmare. The reason I'm saying is some of the stuff we're doing, like the herbal lays, the herbs have a taproot that goes down a metre. Grass goes down about 2 or 3 inches. Mm-hmm. If you top feed something, it doesn't encourage it to grow a root. It just keeps getting it from the artificial you're putting on. Yep. So if you actually have the taproots going right down, it's getting all those nutrients down below. It's also cracking open the ground, which increases your drainage. So for people like me who have wettish soil, very easily tramped, it actually the fields that we have reseeded are now drier than they were. I still would damage them. I still have to be blooming careful, but there's a practical advantage for me to do it. For the dry farmers down in Ardglass, who get no rain, it's another advantage in that the taproot's going down a metre where the moisture still is. So they're able to grow on while the rest of the farm purely on grass has absolutely stopped. It carries on growing a bit longer. So there are practical advantages whether you're a wet farmer or a dry farmer for putting this in, but yet there's absolutely no incentives for me to do it. None.
You've very well demonstrated the value of this education piece there, by the way. The second one, thanks Tim, Louise and Phil for that. The second thing I want to raise is I was out last Friday on Mike's farm actually, because he's in my constituency, and I went down to visit him, and I was struck that, and I'm pretty sure there was funding for this, I was struck by the planted buffer that he had been able to provide between the farmland and the Crumlin River. And you'd hardly point out the relevance of the Crumlin River to Lough Neagh. Funding for those planted areas along riverbanks, around in particular the Lough Neagh catchment area, how do you think that sits with your future funding projections? Is that going to be more available or less available or somewhat threatened by the changes that are taking place?
In theory, with I suppose what the department has said in terms of a Farming with Nature package, at some stage in time being the central pillar of farm support, you would imagine that there would be more financial incentive to do those things. But it comes back to that point that that language is quite vague and is non-committal to a degree. When is that point in time? By what year? By how much funding? And I think there's the kind of the rhetoric angle of it in terms of a vague commitment versus some of the action in this space. So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about in terms of those riparian buffers and things would have been supported through the EFS wider scheme, which has been disbanded, and we will be waiting to 2026 at the earliest for something to come and replace that. And as I said before, there's over 4,000, 5,000 farmers who have fallen out of that scheme, and there's no replacement. So I think there is the need for that clear plan and that transition strategy. The department has said they will have an orderly transition between these schemes and the next, but disbanding EFS wider, that brings that into question. So yeah, and this runs contrary to other parts of the UK. So in Wales, we've seen recently that their sustainable farming scheme has been delayed by another year, but they do have an interim scheme in place, their Habitat Wales scheme, to cover that. In England, before they brought through all of the ELM schemes, they did have increased investment in countryside stewardship. So they were kind of priming the market and saying this is important, get in now, and then that sets you on a good footing. We don't currently have that, and I think it's a big gap.
A pretty crucial piece of bridging the gap there required then before the fund was settled. Finally, I also visited last week the Slieve Cloyne Nature Reserve in the Belfast Hills, where you're working in conjunction with Ulster Wildlife, who originally provided the site. Are there other examples of that interagency working with people, and are you still open to try to work with other conservation and nature agencies to try and provide those solutions for nature and sort of wildlife habitat context?
Yes. So that example where Mike was working, or I suppose as a grazier for Ulster Wildlife, a lot of our members would deliver similar functions for other organisations. So, for example, our current chairperson, Stephen Alexander, is a tenant of the National Trust and is delivering a lot of their kind of management on their land. That is something that the individual farmer, I suppose, makes a decision on, as opposed to us as an organisation in terms of that management. But in saying that, as an organisation, we do endeavour to work with any other organisation that has any sort of interest in this space, whether they're an environmental NGO or another farming organisation as well. And you spoke about bridging the gap, and I suppose we see ourselves as the kind of organisation that can see the perspective from the environmental organisations, but from a farming lens as well, with those farmers who are on that journey and doing that sort of stuff.
Okay, look, thanks for that.
All right, John. William Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're very welcome. And I believe nature-friendly farming is good. I think there's a future for that. There's two extremes in Northern Ireland. On one hand, you have demand for food. You have eggs, for instance, that's very scarce. Supermarkets in England, I'm told at dinner time, have no eggs in their shelves some days. So there's big companies actively lobbying farmers to produce more eggs. Same with chicken. Chickens get quite scarce, and actually birds have been killed short of their time because there's that big a demand on the shelf. So I think there's a balance to be struck. Do you not accept that?
William, can I come in on that? There's a tremendous opportunity here as well in Northern Ireland. There's a movement to implement mandatory animal health plans. And I think farmers fear that that'll become an administrative tick box exercise. But if you look at what the World Health Organization for Animal Health says, 20% of animal protein production is lost due to animal diseases, and you can look this up yourself, which are that's inherently unsustainable. So while I hear what you're saying, we need to look at how we're doing things better, and daily live weight gain can be significantly improved by including herbs and legumes, and in lambs that can be as much as 32%. So while there is a shortage in some areas, we're losing a lot of our animals through to disease and practice, and that's a huge waste in terms of local food production and security. And I think that's something, whenever there is a consideration around animal health plans where the vet is sitting down, they should sit down and have a genuine conversation with farmers about how they can really improve the outputs with what they've got and reduce the losses. That would significantly help agriculture in Northern Ireland and be a really useful tool and not an administrative tick box exercise. And that's something that I am concerned about as a sheep farmer.
I think that comes into how we measure efficiency as well, and it comes back to looking at things in a holistic way when we have these targets regarding climate and biodiversity. If we're going to measure for chicken, for example, in that way, if you're just measuring it on productiveness of the meat that's being produced, but you're not taking into account how that's being produced or where the feed's coming from on a global scale as well, we're sometimes being prone to offsetting the climate damage that we're allowing through our country. But at the same time, of course, we need to keep producing food, and that's absolutely essential. If forgetting about if we, any of these aspects that we've talked about today, if we forget about one and just focus on the other one, that's when they come at loggerheads in the end. So it's keeping that all in tandem with each other as we're pushing towards food security, biodiversity, and tackling the climate crisis. So I think none of them can run on their own. So by keeping to keep that food security goes beyond just the amount of food you're producing. It also goes into the ability to continue to produce that food on into the future. And I think that's where it relies on us, going back to what Tim was saying with the soil and where it comes back to how we need that sort of longer term planning so farmers can know the direction of travel of their farm and continue to produce that food and continue with their farm plan.
Just on that point, in terms of the need to kind of maintain a certain level of production and kind of that, like the whole food systems piece. So at the moment, about 30% of all food that is produced is wasted, and we need to kind of look at that. We, as Cormac said, we need to look at our overseas impact and things and how we can reduce that too. And then I think one of the other elements one of the reasons we're seeing a potential shortage in certain sectors is because those sectors have been really, really heavily hit by the rise in the prices of energy, the rise in prices of fertiliser and fuel. They've been quite input dependent, and then the costs are escalating, and that's having an impact. So it comes into that resilience piece around being able to have farming systems that are able to weather the storm and aren't as, I suppose, subjected to that level of risk from boom and bust as well, if you understand. And then the other point within this too as well is a question around how we use land. So at the moment, I think in the UK, there's about, like, the majority of arable land is used for livestock feed instead of potential other uses where it could be used to feed people directly and stuff. Louise is talking about moving to a system which is more pasture-based and things like that. So is there opportunities on that front? These are big challenges. They're not easy. They're really, really difficult. But I think we need to be looking at that 5, 10, 15 year, like what does our food system need to look like?
I fully agree. I think government needs to look closely at this, because the UK government, as the UK as a whole, we're importing somewhere in the region of 60% of our food. So I mean, that can be a dangerous situation. If there was problems, we see the problem what happened in Ukraine. If that became a wider conflict, there'll be a food shortage in days. I think there's only 7 or 9 days food in front of us in the world.
Yeah, and just to respond to that, because I think self-sufficiency in the UK, I think it's 60%, and then I think that's up to 75% for foods that can be produced here, and for the likes of eggs and poultry, beef, sheep and dairy, we've actually got very high levels of self-sufficiency. It's in fruit and vegetable production and things like that where it's a lot lower. So I agree there is a need to look at where we can increase certain levels of food production, but I don't think it's a blanket across all sectors, and it would need to be very targeted. And then it comes back into that point of how it's produced. Is it produced in a way which is ensuring that you can achieve high levels of output now and in the future, rather than being subjected to that risk? So yeah, it just requires a lot of careful thought and mapping out, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, William. Patsy.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you. Good to see some of you again, and some of you maybe for the first time. And first of all, I would like to pay tribute to the work that you do. I've been out, as Cormac knows, on Bruno Kane's farm, and her dedication and real hard work is something to be seen in the product for it. I'd like to pay tribute to her, especially for organising your event ceremony that I attended to there a few months back. First of all, just there'll be a number of elements, and I hear what you're saying there, Louise, about education, and education is very important, but, and this is the question I'm going to put to yourself and Tim here, is the bottom line, the savings through changes in the use of fertiliser that you have. Most farmers will say, right, show me the accounts at the end of the year and what difference it makes. So could you maybe give us some sort of an indication, just financial, I'm not talking about money terms, whatever the percentage savings that you might have at the end of the year, just savings on expenditure on fertiliser, that would be helpful. And if we could just hear that first of all, and then I'll move on maybe to a few other asks that you might have.
Well, personally, I can give you percentages. I mean, we've reseeded about a third of the farm, so we have saved a third of that fertiliser. Our annual fertiliser bill would have been close to about 45,000. So we've saved about 15,000 so far, and that'll get more as every year we reseed more, because farmers can't reseed everything in 1 year, otherwise there's nothing to feed the cows. So what you have to do is do a certain percentage, and the recommendation is that you reseed 10% per year, and it's out of production for that 2 months where you're reseeding it, and then it's back into production again. That's why you have to do it, and that's why our farmers need to know, are we going to get support for this or not? it's very, you know, it's a fair incentive if you know that the seed that I'm buying is about twice the price as ordinary grass seed.
Aye.
It would be really lovely if it was the same price to be encouraged, but there's no incentives there, and farmers don't do stuff without incentives.
No.
You know?
That's
my answer.
what about yourself?
I'm a small to medium-sized sheep farmer, and we have 80 acres, so it's not a huge farm, but it's a medium-sized farm in terms of Northern Ireland. We have gone cold turkey, Patsy, this year, and maybe foolishly or not, we are implementing no fertiliser, and we're looking at a range of alternatives, including making best use of organic matter in imported slurry, using things like cumates and boron and stuff. So we are saving significantly. We've also slightly reduced our stock to try to find the balance on the farm in terms of what it can produce from natural resources. So it's quite I suppose, a brave step for us as a family. But so far, we think we are doing quite well with that. And I think what would be really helpful for Northern Ireland and would be helpful for farmers like me, if there was some funding to look at case studies like us and to see, follow them for a few years to see how that works. And so that we will make mistakes, we'll not get it all right. But I, like most farmers, I'm a farmer's daughter, and they are stewards of the land, stewards of the animals. We're all only temporary stewards of what we've got. We want to leave things better for the next generation, and that's all farmers. I don't know a farmer who doesn't care about his land and care about his animals passionately. And Northern Ireland is a country of small farmers, basically, and they all want to do the best for their land and for their animals. And so I think it would be really helpful if there was some sort of a scheme. It doesn't need to be huge money, but some sort of support to follow, say, a couple of case studies in each county in Northern Ireland in terms of what they're doing along this, so that we can write it down and learn together as farmers. And the network here is a farmer-led organisation. And you mentioned Brono again. Brono's doing tremendous stuff. And one of the lovely things, it hasn't been planned, but one of the lovely things, and back to the last conversation I had with you in the committee, Patsy, a number of years ago, is that there's now more women in the network leading on farms. And women have a voice in the nature-friendly farming network, which is lovely. And research internationally shows that women are leading the way in terms of regenerative agriculture. And that's just not me saying that. That's the international, I can give your clerk the references to that. And I think that's really positive. So, and going back to your grass ceiling report, it'd be good to go back and look and see what's happened as a result of that. But for us, we have been quite, my family has encouraged me to be quite brave and go down the route of no fertiliser. So that's a significant saving in terms of inputs. And I suppose at the end of the year, we'll only know how we've done in terms of profits. But it feels as if it's going the right direction, absolutely, at this point in time. But I think having a few case studies followed and written up or whatever, that our experiences could be reviewed as we go along, and then see how good that is in the long term would be really helpful.
I'm sort of trying to tease this out just a wee bit further, based on and piggybacking on those points to move us to the policy. If I could just ask you then, based on clearly heritage and legacy and the land is a big issue in the whole island of Ireland. It's a big thing for families. But education is, as you rightly say, a key element to this. Support and incentivisation is also a key element. But if I was to ask you just, and usually the practitioners, usually the guardians of the land, if we were to move to good new practice, and we saw the Minister's statement on Tuesday there, and it's clear that there's evolution in terms of policy going on at the department. So if we were to say to you as a committee, what would your key 4 or 5 bullet points be in terms of policy ask to incentivise new practices and at the end of the day to comply with climate change legislation, as you talk about as well, Cormac, which is there too. What would your 4 or 5 key asks be?
My first one would be education. think we need to have a course on regenerative agriculture at Greenmount instead of teaching high input farming.
Right.
And there's those on high inputs, and they're able to plant out trees and stuff, and that's great. And they're trying to offset some of the stuff they're doing, and I think that's the only way they can do that. But actually, the education system is not actually teaching people about soil and the importance of it, and that needs to be one of the key changes. You have to go down to Limerick actually to get that education here.
Right.
And I know several farmers here in my business development group who sent their children down to Limerick rather than Greenmount, which I think is quite sad. Okay, so that would be my first key point. Maybe you guys want to get the other ones.
Yeah, I actually agree 100% with Tim. We are as farmers in Northern Ireland, we are trying to do this on our own, and within the network has been really helpful. But I think regenerative agriculture is a way of farming which really focuses on the soil, and that actually is linked to not only the health of animals but the health of humans. And we need to really understand the microbiome in the soil, what's under our feet. That's going to affect our people, our animals and our environment if you look at it from a One Health perspective. And I think we need to educate our young farmers and our wider farming community on the importance of that. The Soil Health Nutrient Scheme has been a tremendous step along that road. We really welcome that, but we need to rapidly get up to speed with regenerative practices and really understand how, and I think Northern Ireland has a tremendous future. I have great hopes for farming in Northern Ireland, and I believe in it passionately. But I do think things have to change. We cannot go on the way we've gone for the last 30, 40 years. And I would love to see a regenerative farming course here in Northern Ireland. It would be tremendous.
Just to add on to that, because back to that original point in terms of what is the plan and what is the direction of travel, and I suppose DAERA and wider government being really clear about that and providing a transition plan up to 2030 and really helping farmers to prepare for the future and understand what is going to be funded, because at the moment it's very stop-start, and we'll maybe have something in 2026, and you guys are planning on a lot longer time frames than that. So I think something that outlines what that's going to be and also to what level it's going to be funded, and obviously funding comes from the Treasury for this, and that's been one of the arguments to kind of say why they can't put a budgetary figure to it, but you could put an allocation or proportion of spend, how much is going to be spent on farming with nature and on soil health and things like that out of the total envelope, and then that really influences people's behaviour. Like we've had, I suppose, a lot of the environmental challenges that we're facing at the moment are as a direct result of the Common Agricultural Policy. It's been policy change, not individual farmers that have done that, to your point before. So if you really signal that policy is changing, people will respond to that. So I think those are two of the really key points, and then strategic knowledge exchange, which really capitalises on some of that stuff.
I think that takes it back to what Tim said earlier of the four 10-year plan strategies, like on his farm, that he's aiming for to get away from that fertiliser. He's doing that out of his own incentive, but farmers need that long-term planning. And exactly as Phil said there, the stop-start atmosphere that we're in at the minute doesn't allow for that confidence to say, right, this is the direction of travel that I can go in and know where I'm going to be in 10 years to meet these objectives, when the policy isn't coming out in that way. So just to echo what Phil was saying, like long-term smart objectives that are publicised so people know when things are going to be happening, how much money is going to be available, and how that can work for their farm. So with the peer-to-peer learning.
So there's two ways of doing it in terms of encouraging people down the regeneration route and getting away from using artificial fertiliser. There's two ways of doing that. One is incentivising it by giving a small grant for buying the seed, and the other way is to say that in so many years we're going to limit the amount of fertiliser you're allowed to put on your ground. That's another way. That's the way the South have gone. Not very popular, it has to be said. There's a lot of kicking and screaming about it. but at least they're aware that
the issue
by next year, by 2 years, by 3 years' time, actually you're limited to this amount of nitrogen on your farm. And that maybe kickstarts a process in the head saying, you know what, maybe I need to, to do that, I'm going to have to reseed some of my ground in a different way or treat it differently.
Sorry, Patsy, Tim, can I just ask a specific on that one that's in my mind about the ROI and them saying you're only allowed so much nitrogen in 2 years' time or in 3 years' time. So I'm assuming that includes what they put on through slurry, manure and artificial fertiliser, is that right?
Yes.
So it's a combination of all?
It is. Yeah.
Okay. And how do they have to get the slurry tested, or is there a standard?
I don't know what they do down here. Over here is just a general. They say all slurry's the same, which it certainly isn't, because the guy putting on feeding their cows 3 ton of meal against mine getting half a ton of meal, there's a serious difference in the punch that slurry has. But mine's treated exactly the same.
Sorry, Patsy. Sorry, Patsy.
No, I was more or less complete there, unless you had any other bullet points to add.
No, I don't think there'd be any strategic bullet points.
Just on that, I think we kind of covered policy and things like that, but I think the point around slurry is kind of data and how that informs decision making and benchmarking and things like that. And yeah, MSO, we've spoken about that, slurry testing, how you manage your herd as well. It's making informed decisions based on the data, and quite often that leads you down the so-called nature-friendly route. So
specifically on what?
On soil, on like collecting livestock performance, on your input, just being a lot of the reasons people are making the decisions to do farming in this way is because the evidence is saying actually you'll be more financially salient or robust as a result of doing it.
Yeah.
The only one thing, sorry.
The data is really, really important on the farm, for example. You need data about your genetics, you need data about how efficient, for example, I know now, based on information, how efficient each ewe is. If you get one ewe that produces 90 kilograms of lamb in 90 days and another one that's producing you 30, well, the one at 30 has to be culled. Unfortunately, you have to make those decisions. So having really good data on your farm about genetics, about how you're doing in terms of your soil nutrients, how your pH is, all of that, farming has got to be really, all of that needs to come together to make really good decisions about how you're using the land. Your animal health and welfare plan is really important as well. So all of that needs to come together to help farmers make really good decisions around the future of their farms.
And one last point from me, I suppose a key ask would be we need to clarify how to measure your carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Because it is an absolute nightmare at the minute. Because farmers aren't given any benefit for any hedges we have, and we have miles of really well kept hedges. And by well kept, I don't mean a metre tall and clipped down. Big bushy hedges that are a lot of carbon. We're not given anything for if we have a high soil carbon content. All those sorts of things. And the other thing is the way methane is measured is a disaster for farmers, absolute disaster. Methane, I would encourage you all, I'm sure you all have been on this committee, but I would encourage you to look on different websites to find out the way methane is measured. Methane is a circular gas if the number of cattle stay the same. It goes up into the air, it breaks down into carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide comes back into the soil again to grow the grass. It's a circular gas if cows are grazing or animals are grazing outside. It's a wee bit different if the cows are enclosed the whole time.
Yes.
But it is a circular gas, and yet we're completely penalised for having that. And in our case, when you're actually not sowing fertiliser and you're increasing the carbon in your soil, as we have evidence that it's now doing slowly, there's no benefit at all for the farmers. So there needs to be a way, there's several different ways that the carbon footprints are measured. There's no standardised way of doing it because everyone wants to pick a way that's best for them. That's one of the problems.
Okay.
Can I just add to that very quickly? I have been in my local BDG for a number of years, and that has been a really positive thing to have been part of. But in recent years, I have been carbon benchmarking through that, and I actually find the reports very hard to use as a farmer. So I think, and I'm a trustee of AgResearch, I think we could work with organisations like AgResearch to come up with some sort of report that a farmer can actually understand and use on their farm. I think that would be really helpful. I'm a reasonably intelligent individual and I can't use my report, and I'm really sorry to have to say that, but I find it really difficult.
Sure. I think that's very, very useful to hear that as to the way forward, and thank you for your evidence there. I'll not open up the whole issue of biodiversity and pollination. The only aspect I'll say is, being on Brona's farm, the produce of the honey from her bees is excellent, but it opens up the whole other issue of pollination, bees, all that stuff as part of the biodiversity plan too. So, but thank you very much for that. That has been very helpful indeed.
Okay, thank you very much. That's useful. Just one final question, Tim, if you don't mind, to yourself. I know you did say you're about break-even point in your profits, I suppose, or finances. I did hear Louise say that they're probably down maybe a bit of a percentage in stocking rate or whatever, which is probably understandable. In overall production, are you breaking even or down, setting aside the profitability?
Well, the farm's making money, the dairy farm's making money, okay, but
No,
what do you mean?
I didn't ask that.
Okay.
Because I heard what you said about break-even and profitability. I'm asking in production terms, are you down significantly, or is it around break-even?
We're down 5%.
In production?
In production.
In milk production?
In milk production,
okay.
with, but the savings in fertiliser have offset that. So that's why I'm saying we're about even.
Sorry, that's profitability. I'm merely pointing towards the production.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So,
okay,
5% less, I would say, of the reseeded ground.
So you're producing just 5% less milk production,
yes.
Right, than you were 5 years ago or 10 years, whatever the time scale is.
Using 33% less fertiliser?
Yes.
Yeah.
On that point, because we talk about, I suppose, the transition, and if you remove artificial inputs which are having potentially a negative impact on your soil isn't going to recover overnight. So there's a time lag before that improves. But there is evidence that shows that will increase, and you can get up to your previous level of production for certain systems. There's evidence, there's some dairy farmers in the south that over the space of probably about 5 to 7 years have moved solely to a herbal lay system. They've reduced, off the top of my head, their input costs by €80,000. Their levels of output are the same. So production actually hasn't had a dip, and that's not necessarily going to be the same for everyone.
Is that across the board now, or is that only in certain?
A lot of that's going to. There's so many variables.
Because what I've found, sorry, Phil, is in some cases that probably is correct, but in a number of other cases it's not, where the production has suffered greatly.
Yeah.
That's
I
what I'm
was in
hearing.
Solihull last year. Sorry to interrupt there. Just because I've been down with our business development group, down to Solihull, which is the research farm in the south of Ireland, which is totally dedicated just to clover and grass. It's not actually, there's no herbs involved. And they are proving beyond doubt that they're growing
but I think
at least the same amount of grass.
In fairness, Tim, you will get a difference on a properly researched farm than you will in your ordinary commercial farm. You know, that's farming with their 80 acres or 90 acres, whatever.
There's just on that point, because there's so many variables. It could be the knowledge base and the skill level of the particular farmer.
Well, absolutely,
there's lots of different things, but there are
Okay.
examples that show, with the right variables in place, you can do quite well.
Mr. Chairman, the profit margins in sheep are actually quite low, as you know, and but we have reduced our levels of. We've reduced the number of VOs this year. We intend to build that up gradually in terms of build it back up again in terms of finding what is the balance on the farm. We have certainly reduced our expenditure on inputs to the farm, but we anticipate that we will be more profitable this year, the way things are going. So, and it'll be good, that's why I said it'd be good if there was a number of these case studies actually followed, that would actually follow the learning.
Although there is loads of research down south now in this, and in New Zealand, that the farms that are, research farms that have done it, plus ordinary practical farmers, are growing the same grass. I'm saying 5% less I do measure the grass every week religiously, so I know where we are.
Okay, Tim, Phil, Cormac and Louise, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation, so I'm sure we'll be in contact in the future. Thank you for allowing us to come.
Thank you.
You guys, thanks for the opportunity.
Heading after lunch. Maybe see you about.
Okay, members, we'll move into agenda item 6, which is the SL1 on dangerous dogs, designated types order, Northern Ireland 2024. I refer you to pages 49 to 60 in your pack. Clerk's memo is dated 29th of April 2024, pages 49 to 50. And the SL1 dangerous dogs, designated types order, Northern Ireland, is at pages 51 to 60. This SR will be subject to negative resolution. At our meeting on the 2nd of May, the SL1 was considered. However, we agreed to ask the Department for a briefing. So we'll wait till the officials get to the table.
Yes, thank you.
Me too. Can you record this here? Yeah.
Okay, welcome Christopher Andrews, Neil Gartland and Elsie McGarvey. You're all very welcome. So when you're ready, over to yourselves to brief us. Neil, if you're kicking off.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning to you and members of the committee. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to brief you on the Dangerous Dogs Designated Types Order Northern Ireland 2024, which is the first of 2 statutory rules proposed by the Department to implement safeguarding measures on XL bully type dogs. As you've mentioned, Chair, my name is Neil Gartland and I'm joined today by Deputy Director of Animal Health and Welfare Christopher Andrews and Senior Veterinary Officer Elsie McGarvey, who along with myself will answer any questions committee members may have. Dog control laws and dangerous dogs legislation is a devolved matter, and like the rest of the UK, Northern Ireland first enacted specific rules on controlling named types of dogs in 1991. Our parent legislation, in this case the 1983 Dogs Order, contains the ability to add breeds to the list of controlled dogs and mirrors the provisions in place in England and Wales and Scotland. Members will be aware that the UK government decided to take steps to deal with XL bully type dogs in September 2023, following a spate of serious and sadly fatal attacks in England and Wales. The Scottish government then made a similar announcement in January 2024. Minister Muir assumed post in February 2024, and after careful consideration of the prevailing situation, he announced his intention to introduce safeguards on XL bully type dogs in his oral statement to the Assembly on the 5th of March. The Minister has made his views clear and explained his rationale for this decision to the House in written form following detailed questioning and also in person to key stakeholders. The Minister has acknowledged the differing views on this matter and has stated that it was not an easy decision to make. However, what became clear was the need to act swiftly and conclusively to protect public safety and to use the tools at his disposal to mitigate the risk of serious attacks, following a significant uplift in the known licensed population of XL bully type dogs here in the wake of the announcements in Great Britain. For example, in the intervening months since the announcement of measures in England and Wales to restrict ownership, the number of legally licensed XL bully type dogs in Northern Ireland has almost doubled. It is not possible to state definitively where these dogs have come from, but it is probable that many have been displaced from other parts of the UK. This has meant that Northern Ireland is dealing with an expanding cohort of these types of dogs with no way of determining if they have been appropriately trained, socialised or demonstrated aggressive behaviours in the past. The Minister believes it is the right time to act whilst overall numbers of XL bully type dogs in Northern Ireland remain manageable, and we can in the main track where these dogs are. This will bring Northern Ireland into parity with the rest of the UK, protecting the public from attacks by XL bully type dogs, as well as preventing any undesired consequences which could arise as a result of not introducing safeguards, such as Northern Ireland becoming a breeding hotspot for these types of dogs. We acknowledge that there are differing views on the effectiveness of breed-specific legislation, and we accept that reducing dog attacks requires a multifactorial approach, including encouraging responsible dog ownership. However, the fact of the matter is that XL bully type dogs are large, powerful dogs that have been involved in several fatal attacks in the UK, and therefore it is important to be proactive by introducing these safeguards now, to mitigate against such attacks happening in Northern Ireland. The Department continues to work closely with councils to track the number of XL Bully type dogs licensed in their respective areas. There are a further 38 dogs licensed since the Minister's oral statement on the 5th of March and 87 since the Prime Minister's announcement on the introduction of restrictions in GB, or in England and Wales, on the 15th of September 2023, bringing the current total in Northern Ireland to 178 licensed XL Bully type dogs today. The legislative proposal required to introduce safeguarding measures broadly mirror those in place across the rest of the UK, and the reasons for this are twofold. Firstly, the primary legislation powers under which the statutory rules will be made mirror that in England, Scotland and Wales. Furthermore, there could be unintended consequences of any divergence from the legislation already in place in the rest of the UK. Two statutory rules are required. The first, which has been put forward for your consideration today, is the Dangerous Dogs Designated Type Order Northern Ireland 2024. The committee will wish to note the detail of the second SR, including the timelines for the exemption and compensation scheme, is actively being considered and final decisions have not yet been made. Members will, of course, have an opportunity to consider that second SR prior to introduction. We would anticipate that we will be seeking your consideration of this second SR towards the end of June. In order to quickly implement the safeguarding measures here, in the interest of public safety and within the powers available in primary legislation, the proposed first SR being considered today will add XL Bully type dogs to the list of dogs bred for fighting under Article 25A of the Dogs Northern Ireland Order 1983. It will require that from the 18th of June 2024, all owners of XL Bully type dogs do not breed from it, do not sell or exchange ownership of the dog, including giving it away, do not abandon the dog, keep the dog muzzled and on a lead in public, and do not permit it to stray. Importantly, the legislation will also set an appointed day after which it will be illegal to own an XL Bully type dog in Northern Ireland without an exemption certificate. It is proposed that date is the 31st of December 2024 to allow sufficient time for local councils to process exemption applications. Article 25A of the 1983 order also requires the Department to put in place compensation and exemption schemes, offering compensation for any animals euthanised, as well as allowing dogs to be exempted subject to satisfying conditions. In addition to the conditions just mentioned, the dog must also be neutered, microchipped and have third-party insurance. As mentioned, the detail of these conditions will be included in the second statutory rule, the final detail of which is currently under consideration. To note, we are mindful of the issues which have risen in England and Wales, such as transfer of ownership in the event of an owner dying, and are seeking to mitigate any issues that have been brought to our attention where possible. A working group has been established with between DAERA officials and the Northern Ireland Dog Advisory Group, which represents dog wardens here. The purpose of this group is to work through design and implementation of the safeguards, given local councils' role in enforcing this legislation. Councils will also be responsible for administering the exemption certificates. The working group has been addressing issues such as the IT system for processing applications, training for dog wardens in applying the confirmation standard, and communications and guidance required for dog owners and vets. We have also provided an update to the PSNI and will be inviting them to join the working group meetings in the near future when the operational details have been agreed. We have also been engaging with the Chief Inspector in Met Police responsible for the Dangerous Dogs portfolio in relation to providing training for dog wardens here to deal with XL Bully type dogs. Discussions to date have been fruitful and are ongoing. Additionally, we have been engaging with a range of stakeholders to garner their views and listen to any issues or concerns which need addressed as we seek to implement this first SR and settle the policy detail for the second SR, as I said, to be brought forward hopefully at the end of next month. These discussions have included the Veterinary Associations and the Dog Control Coalition, of which the USPCA and Dogs Trust are members. The Minister, along with officials, also attended the recent all-party group on animal welfare to provide an update on the XL Bully dog proposals. We also meet weekly with counterparts in England, Scotland and Wales, where the restrictions have already come into force. These meetings provide valuable insight on how the process is working in these jurisdictions, allowing us to avail of lessons learned. Furthermore, we've been in contact with the Department of Rural and Community Development in the Republic of Ireland, who are responsible for dog control policy. We are aware that Minister Humphreys has convened a new stakeholder group to consider dog control policy, including the issue of restricted breeds, and we intend to engage further with all stakeholders in the coming weeks as the detail of the second SR is finalised. To note, the restrictions that we are seeking to put in place here on XL Bully type dogs mirror some of the restrictions already in place in the Republic of Ireland, primarily around muzzling and lead requirements when in public. I wish to reiterate the Minister's desire that we will seek to support XL Bully dog owners as much as possible to meet the conditions for exemption so that they can keep their dog. The restrictions are not about punishing XL Bully type dog owners or their owners, but protecting public safety by preventing possible attacks on people or other animals. Considering that and the Minister's commitment to work with the organisations on how we can better advance efforts around the deed not breed issue, I can inform members that officials will continue the ongoing engagement with our key stakeholders once the XL bully type schemes are up and running. The purpose of this will be to listen to their ideas, suggestions and proposals on how we can better ensure responsible ownership. We have also recently engaged with DEFRA, who have indicated that a report is being prepared on responsible dog ownership and will be published this autumn. We will be keen to see the recommendations and to ascertain what more can be done here. This will build on previous work by the department, which has included publishing guidance on choosing the right dog and how to understand dog behaviour, a social media campaign on safer interactions with dogs, as well as working with partners to highlight the need to control dogs in public, including laws on livestock worrying. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to take any questions that members may have, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Neil, for that. I did note you said that the further legislation with exemption and compensation schemes likely to come before us before the end of June.
Yes.
Is that slightly putting the cart before the horse? So that if we approve this now, then we don't know what the exemption or the compensation schemes may be. So is that putting us in a difficult position then? Because obviously you're accepted or not position.
So I think this first SR deals with the immediate public safety issues around safeguarding against XL bully type dogs, and we've seen recent attacks both in Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Council District and in Lisburn and Castlereagh, and so they need to move quickly to introduce the measures for muzzling in public, mirrors what's happened in GB, and that's why this first measure is being brought before you today. Within that legislation, when we do that, we then need to bring forward an exemption and compensation scheme that's required under the Primary Legislative Act, but noting that that won't be finalised for a number of weeks yet to allow the scheme to open in the summer. That's why we're moving forward with the first SR now. Again, it's about the public safety element. If we were to wait any much longer, we would be concerned around the continuing risk to the public from XL bully type dogs. But the consideration and the detail of that second SR around the levels of compensation that we will pay for dogs that are surrendered, the exemption certificate fee, the detail around timelines for neutering, and the overall ability for us to implement the compensation exemption requirements and parameters of the scheme will come to you for consideration. The reason we've done the first SR today is because of the public safety issues and the concerns around that, and the need to move quickly.
Okay. Those three attacks that you mentioned, they were all XL bully involved, were they?
Due to XL bullies, yes.
Okay. And also you did mention that you understand the issue around breed-specific legislation maybe not being the total answer, while it seems to be a stopgap position. Where are we with trying to look at other options around just breed-specific legislation?
Well, I think, Chair, it's worth to note that this is the first time we've used this legislation since 1991, so we don't do this lightly. And the rationale for the Minister advancing this first SR and looking towards the second is the public safety issue. But he acknowledges the calls from stakeholders and some in the wider public that we should be looking at the deed not breed, and the Department has tried to advance that in recent years. We have extensive online guidance around how to keep a dog, how to responsibly own a dog, how to live in your home and share a home with a dog, but we acknowledge that more potentially could be done in this area. The Minister has been quite clear in the Assembly and through written answers to members and in his engagement with stakeholders that he wants us to engage with the widest range of our stakeholders possible to see what their ideas are, what more can be done. So we're willing to listen to see what ideas come forward. In addition, as I said in the opening remarks, I'm aware of the publication of a report, a DEFRA-led report on responsible ownership in the autumn. We'd be keen to see what recommendations are in that report and if there's anything that could be applied here. So taking the Minister's lead on this, we are aware that it is an issue. We are aware that there is concern that breed-specific legislation potentially puts some dogs that are of good behaviour at a negative consequence because it has been muzzled and so in public. But the broad thrust of this is to protect public because the XL bully type dog, more so than other breeds, has been implicated in many attacks.
Yeah, Chair, if I may as well, the other measures that are available under the dogs order are things like control conditions, but they're exclusively applied after an incident has happened, so they are reactive rather than proactive. So there is measures and facilities under the dogs order for dog wardens to apply various types of conditions to dogs, including muzzling and requiring them to be confined to a specific place, but that's always after the event. And regrettably, if there's a serious incident where a person has sustained life-changing injuries, perhaps sort of placing a condition on that dog to have it muzzled or be confined to a certain place would be seen to be a bit weak in retrospect.
Okay, thanks. Patsy?
Thanks very much, Chair. And thank you for being with us here today. Just, I'm looking down, and I was going over the briefing last night about this. Dogs bred for fighting are to have the characteristics of a type bred for that purpose. Now, what are the characteristics of a type bred for that purpose? Because I know many dogs, and I'm not quite sure where you're going with the characteristics. I think that I'm not sure if you could even enshrine that in law to be so specific as to be useful in terms of an enforcement officer.
Well, I think that's why the legislation, once passed, will come alongside the breeding confirmation standard, which has been agreed in Great Britain around how we apply the legislation to those dogs. And when people self-declare that their dog is an XL bully, there will be guidance associated with that. In terms of dogs bred for fighting, it takes into account the size of the dog, the power of the dog, the ability of the dog, as has been seen with XL bully type dogs, to attack in public over this past number of years. So from that, and in consideration of the evidence you have in front of you, that is what would be defined as a dog bred for fighting. And then to understand the type of crossbreed that we have in front of us and facing us at the minute, that would be subject to the confirmation standard that's been agreed by DEFRA and stakeholders on that position. But Chris, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, in the origins of the dog bred for fighting, I think, as you're aware, come from the 1991 legislation. And that at that time was by and large put in place to deal with an upsurge in incidents involving pit bulls. And it was considered at that point in time that pit bulls were disproportionately involved in fighting and fighting incidents, and the main reason that they were being bred was to have aggressive traits to then be used to be set on other dogs or indeed other persons. It is our understanding, and we are of the view that XL bully type dogs are share genetic traits with pit bulls, and therefore can be legitimately classified as a dog bred for fighting under Article 25A. So it's about both the origins of the legislation and why the legislation came in place, and then the ancestry and the origins of this particular type of dog being a sort of being able to trace its lineage and how it was has came about to pit bulls.
Well, I get all that bit about the origins of the legislation. Okay. Everything that's very apparent. It's the applicability of it in terms of the ability of a dog to fight in public. I think those were your words there, Neil. How do you define that? Seriously, that could be from the wee snappy terrier right across. I know they don't exhibit the characteristics of a fighting dog, but there could be any multiplicity of different types and breeds of dogs and crossbreeds of dogs that would fit that description.
I think that there are, but I think it's the evidence base that you bring forward when you introduce proposals such as this. So the evidence base of XL bully types dogs has shown that they are have more of a potential to attack in public than other types of dogs. So from using that as a potential route by way of which you would define it then as a dog bred for fighting, because it has been implicated in more attacks than any other type of dog at this present time that we can see, or serious attacks, should I say, rather than other types of dogs, which is why that action needs to be taken. You know, if we look at the figures from GB, February 2021 to February 2024, 23 fatal attacks, disproportionately many of those involved XL bully dogs. We have seen the serious attack number of only weeks ago in Lisburn and Castlereagh, XL bully type dog, and in Armagh, Brambridge and Craigavon, XL bully type dog. So while of course we have to then supplement the legislation with the guidance, which is the breeding confirmation standard, to help us understand and the dog wardens understand when a dog would be defined as an XL bully type dog. It is the origins of the legislation, as Chris has outlined. With XL bully type dogs, it's its relation to pit bulls in particular, and then it's using the evidence that we have over this past number of years to show that it is a dog that is more has a higher risk of a potential to fight, a dog bred for fighting, or ergo from that attack in public or attack other animals.
Okay. Now, just one other question, brief one. I think you said the exemptions. Can you give me some sort of a flavour of the thinking of what exemptions might be?
So the exemption certificate is basically, when the legislation is brought in, it's legal to own an XL bully from January 2025 is our current thinking on this. So the exemption certificate exempts you from that requirement. So basically it exempts you from the illegality of owning the dog, and you can get that exemption certificate by applying the measures that we have outlined in the legislation today. So as long as the dog is neutered, has third-party insurance, is muzzled in public, and you apply those safeguarding measures, you're exempted then from the need for the animal to be illegal. You're allowed to keep the animal. That's what the exemption refers to.
Okay. That's grand, thank you.
All right. Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Niamh, for your presentation. And I absolutely understand the dilemma that the Minister is in with regards to this and the difficulties that there are, but I suppose it does sit uneasy with me, the fact that we're demonising a breed, whenever very often it's the owners and how they condition a dog. So that doesn't sit well with me. However, just with regards to this, and you have actually confirmed it in your presentation, the DEFRA guidance was obviously that the owner does the self-identification of the breed, and you've confirmed that. Could this then lead to misidentification? And is there an expertise in Northern Ireland, so if someone is unsure, that they can go to get confirmation?
So two things on that. Well, I'll come in. So owners self-identify at present for licensing. So as a result of that, they should know broadly how to identify what their dog is. They will have guidance published how to identify their dog if they think it's an XL Bully type dog. And there's a wealth of experience of how this has progressed in England and Wales. As I outlined, we've been in discussions with the police trainers who trained the police forces in England and Wales how to identify XL Bully type dogs, and we're seeking to get that training into Northern Ireland for our dog wardens. We've been, as I say, in close contact with the dog wardens. This working group meets twice a week and ongoing conversations nearly every day. So that training will be provided to help dog wardens build up that expertise in each council area for how to identify XL Bully dogs. So that will be that twofold approach. One, our guidance online based on the confirmation standard, based on the communications lessons learned from England and Wales. And then in addition, we are seeking to get and develop specific training from the police in England and Wales from their experience of how to identify and deal with XL Bully dogs for our council officers here as well and dog wardens. But Chris, I don't think
I don't really, yeah, it's probably going to make the same point, and just to reinforce that the 178 licensed XL Bully dogs that we have at present and we keep talking about, those are owners who are quite comfortable saying that my dog is an XL Bully dog and licensing as such. And obviously, when the scheme goes live, we will, as Neil has indicated, we will produce guidance and have advice for individuals on how they should type their dog. But what we would expect to see would be a minimum of 178 people applying for exemption certificates.
Okay, and obviously this regulation includes not being able to sell, exchange, or give away or abandon. Obviously, people's circumstances can change. An owner can die, and an animal will then, maybe unbeknown to whoever has then acquired the animal, they are not aware that it is an XL type booty. They may then bring it to a rehoming shelter, so on. What I suppose, what do they do with that at that stage, and what could be the outcome for the dog? Or are we talking about the dog then possibly being euthanised?
So one of the issues that we have worked with DEFRA colleagues on, and some of the lessons learned, I guess, from their scheme, is to make sure that the legislation allows for a transfer of ownership in limited circumstances. So when somebody passes away, or indeed if there is a breakup in a relationship, or that somebody can actually rightfully take on the ownership of the dog if they so wish to. In the event that, sadly, in the event that nobody wants to take on ownership of the dog, say the individual, the dog owners, the owner of the dog passes away, then the situation may well be that the only place for that dog will be, unfortunately, a rescue and rehoming centre. That's not necessarily different from any other breed, but I do take the point that there might be a situation whereby people are not willing to take on the ownership of the dog from another person.
Something that there's going to be more work done in relation to that. And then just finally, it's around sort of publicising this. And I know you referenced the social media campaign, but is there anything more with regards to that?
Well, I think we've established a communication subgroup with council press officers and DARE press officers to ensure that communications are amplified as much as possible, both through ourselves on our normal channels and through councils utilising their channels and media expertise as well, both with respect to the current SR that's under discussion today for the safeguarding measures from the 18th of June, and then as we develop the scheme further and announce the details of that scheme to open hopefully midsummer, pending everything going well with that second SR. So there'll be extensive communications, and as I said, we're engaged on both the councils and ourselves on that. it wouldn't just be social media. You know, there will be, I assume, a lot of interest in this from the media, as has been to date. So,
all right, thanks very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, folks, for coming in to brief us today. Look, I'll be totally honest, I have a long list of concerns around this. Obviously, the current judicial review that's at the minute ongoing in England, the lack of evidence around breed-specific legislation, the disparity with the Republic, and the definition of an XL bully. And I actually read earlier on the Blue Cross website, the charity's website, genetics and parentage is not considered when actually defining an XL bully. So look, from my point of view, and look, you can come back with your own comments, but I don't believe that this should be laid under negative resolution, just with those concerns. And probably the biggest concern is obviously the JR.
I'll take a couple of the comments, if that's okay. So, yes, aware of the JR in England and Wales against DEFRA. So the first application for leave of that JR was refused. They appealed and it went to High Court, and the second judges gave approval for it to proceed. So DEFRA will robustly defend that on the basis that they introduced safeguarding measures to protect public safety. So we met with DEFRA last week to discuss that. Obviously they couldn't go into too much detail, this is their own legal case, but we're aware of it. We are not aware of any moves to introduce judicial review measures or proceedings against us, and I also am unaware that any leave has been granted for judicial review in Scotland. So it is DEFRA at the moment are involved with judicial review, but I know that they will robustly defend that and the points that have been raised. On the evidence base, we would believe that there is a firm evidence base for introduction of these measures and the public safety concerns that prevail. As I highlighted, there have been 23 attacks from February 21 to 24 in England and Wales. Disproportionately XL bullies have been identified as a reason behind those and as the dog involved. There have been, only in recent times, 2 attacks here. Only last October, an attack in the Republic of Ireland against a female down south. So it's, every so often and frequently we hear of attacks that XL bullies are involved in, and quite severe and disturbing attacks at that, and unfortunately with that a number of fatalities. I think with respect...
Just on that point, Neil, and sorry to cut across in relation to the breed-specific legislation. Earlier this year there was a child seriously injured by a collie dog who was actually being walked on a lead.
Yes.
So again, that's... Well, there's a question here about evidence, but certainly in my mind that would undermine the breed-specific, or some of the evidence maybe in breed-specific legislation.
If I may answer, I think the situation we find with the dogs that come under the breed-specific legislation and the rationale for adding the XL bully dog to the breed-specific legislation is to do with the sheer size and power of that dog. As Neil has indicated, that we are absolutely totally aware that we have a number of dog attacks every year. I think we've got something in the region of 660 reported dog attacks to date in this particular year. So you're absolutely right in what you're saying, that all dogs can attack, and that's very much the message that we as government put out about responsible dog ownership. Any dog can be dangerous, but the problem with these dogs is they are so large and so powerful that if they do attack and if they are involved in an incident, the injuries and the outcomes of those incidents tend to be a lot more severe, which is why the safeguards have been introduced. And it's back to that whole issue of they've been disproportionately involved in severe incidents across the UK. So I would totally concede your point that there are many dog attacks that go on day and daily where there are injuries and nips and bites. And I'm not trying to dismiss the incident you're talking about at all, but it's more about the powerful nature of those dogs, and to a degree the fact that those dogs may demonstrate more aggressive traits as well than perhaps other domestic dogs and more common dogs.
Yeah. And I think with that concern, Chris, as well, on the collie instance, we could, council officials could then apply control conditions to the dog, but again, it's reactive, it's after the attack has happened, and given the size of the XL bully type dog and the severity of the attacks to date, that's why there's a public safety concern with allowing dogs in public without the muzzle, without being on lead, without being proper control, and then the additional measures as well. If you don't mind, can I go on to the... In terms of the south... So part of what we're attempting to do today, certainly with this first SR, will bring us in line with what's happening in the Republic of Ireland. There are safeguarding measures against XL bully type dogs when the dog is in public. It has to be muzzled and on a lead and under the control at all times.
So there's no legislative ban in the Republic, to my knowledge?
No, there isn't a legislative underpinning around neutering and that aspect of the legislation that we're seeking to progress. However, with a view to what we are attempting to do in Northern Ireland, which again aligns us with the rest of GB because of the public safety concerns across the jurisdictions there as well. Minister Humphreys announced on the 5th of March that a stakeholder group is being set up to specifically look at breed-specific legislation down there, noting what is happening in Northern Ireland and also noting, I'd imagine, the attacks that have been attributed to XL bullies there as well. So obviously we'll have to wait the outcome of that group engagement and what they determine to be the best way forward there, but they are aware of the concern around XL bully type dogs, and that's partly the reason why that group has also been established.
I suppose in terms of the current stakeholder group that has been set up in the Republic, we're probably some time until, or some way off, a legislative ban being introduced, and obviously my concern would be what happens in the interim. There would be, I suppose, a loophole opened up in terms of smuggling and additional breeding, if there was a ban to be brought in here. Just Neil, you touched on councils.
Yes.
There was a figure of a maximum cost of £150,000.
Yes.
Is that per council or for all of the councils?
All of the councils. So that would involve the IT system set up to administer the Certificate of Exemption scheme, to administer the training that is required for councils to become the experts within XL bully type confirmation standards and help to identify the animals. So that is a very much an upper maximum figure, and that would include anticipated costs for the department for any animals that are surrendered as well. I don't expect it to be near £150,000, but that's the upper limit, and that's the business case that we're working on at the minute.
When roughly will that business case and conclude in relation to the exact determined costs?
I imagine over the weeks ahead, once we finalise the details of the second SR, we can then complete the business case, because part of the figures in the business case rely on what we set as a limit for the compensation payable by the department, as an example. It will also set the exemption fee, which is £94.20, I think, in GB. I think we would broadly seek to mirror that. That's a fee that goes directly to the councils, so that can be used to offset costs of the councils administering this scheme as well. So once those policy details are settled, then the business case can be finalised. But as I say, 150,000 is an upper limit for both the department and the councils in terms of establishing the scheme.
No, that's okay. Look, I know I fired a lot of questions at you there, but I suppose I do understand this legislation is very, very new in England, and the JR is going on. I suppose from my point of view, and a lot of my concerns rest around the breed-specific legislation, yes. And I still have great concerns around that, where the breed is actually being demonised and punished. But look, it's up to the rest of the committee. I would be of the opinion to bring this through via affirmative rather than negative, for those reasons that I've laid out. But it's back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, John Blair.
Thank you, Chair. Like others, I am instinctively uncomfortable with breed-specific legislation, but I think the duty to public safety and looking at some factors, two in particular, and I'll outline them. First of all, the issue of proportionality. If there are a higher number of dog attacks from a breed that has relatively small numbers of dogs representing it on these islands, for instance, a few hundred, and there are dozens of attacks versus a breed where the ownership levels will reach tens of thousands, and there are single digits attacks, then the stats speak for themselves. And the second factor is that we are highly dependent on responsible dog ownership. And we bandy about this term like it's the accepted thing and the done thing, and the truth is it isn't always. Life experience has taught me, and my work experience has taught me, that there are more dogs than legislation reaches, kept in unsuitable conditions, not walked often enough. And the reality is that if those dogs are more prone to attack, then the risks are exacerbated, quite frankly. So on that basis, I can accept what's before me. But I think I have to ask then, and I'm grateful for the presentation, at what level would this public information, public education piece around this be done? Will it be done by councils? Will it be done by the department? Will it be done in conjunction with councils? And when will that start to roll out?
So I think in terms of the responsible ownership point, John, as opposed to communications around the scheme, around the...
No, the legislation.
So as soon as if the committee is minded to agree to the SR and we seek to make and lay that before the 20th of May, we would immediately issue communications, press releases, social media and direct guidance for owners to announce the measures are coming in. We also expect significant media interest in it as well to amplify the messaging. And as I said, the subgroup on communications will be working with councils and council press officers again to get the messages out at the local council level too, straight away. So.
And saying you prompted me, Neil, through you, Chair, the issue of public information on responsible ownership. Is there any work going to be done there over and above what's already been done? Because I want to reiterate the examples of dogs which appear volatile, kept in very confined spaces. I've dealt with constituents who are afraid to go into their gardens, people who feel vulnerable because of this, afraid to let their children out. And this is the real world versus our idealistic position that there should be good, responsible dog and pet ownership.
So I think, John, some of the work that I mentioned around seeking to see what the DEFRA report will be in autumn, seeking to engage with stakeholders on what responsible ownership really looks like and what more we can do in that space can happen at any time. We're happy to engage on it. In terms of our proactive planning around further communications or guidance online, we're not planning for that at the moment. In addition to what's already there, because the colleagues will understand the team are focused on getting the XL Bully scheme established first. However, what we would be content to do is that in our communications around announcing the laying of the legislation or the safeguarding measures coming into effect, that we signpost the guidance is already there. It's quite extensive, and also then in the interim period, we, as I say at the outset in my opening remarks, the Minister's indicated that he wishes the department to engage as widely as possible with stakeholders who have suggestions, ideas on what we can do to better promote responsible ownership and the deed not breed issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Patsy wanted in briefly.
It's just, I think you mentioned there that, thanks very much for that, Chair, for that, man. You mentioned that there were 660 dog attacks in a year. Aye?
Yes, this year to date, yes.
Yes. On humans?
That will be a tax on persons, yes.
On persons, right. So, off that 660, you know where I'm going to go. I presume you're coming along and you're presenting to the committee here saying that the majority of these are XL Bully dogs. What number of that 660 were XL Bully dogs?
So the councils don't actually record the type of dog involved in an incident, and there's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, it is quite hard to properly identify a dog at a point of attack because there could be a myriad of, a dog could be many types or many breeds. But where there's a serious incident, the dog will be seized and the dog will be taken away, potentially to be properly typed or properly identified. So when not all, it would only be in the most serious of incidents where the dog would be seized and the dog would then be sort of taken away for some further positive verification.
We're getting to the core of it now. So of that 660, how many would have been serious incidents?
It's not broken down in council figures, but we can attempt to find out for you.
Sorry, maybe I'm a bit slow on it here. You said they're taken away and they're identified.
So apologies, sorry. What councils do is provide, and these statistics are freely available. We publish them on the DERA website. They are asked to provide information on attacks on persons and where a dog is set on a person. So that is just a headline figure. I totally take your point. There's detail below that maybe we can actually find out for you in terms of the numbers involved, which would be deemed to be serious, or numbers which were deemed to be involving XL bullies.
Leading on, 660 attacks reported. Of those, the specifics you need to know is how many of those were serious, and if they're serious, clearly the council, you've after signed there, the council takes them in, identifies them, all that. So therefore the councils would know of those number that were serious, how many of those were from different breeds or by different breeds?
Yeah, so I've got further figures here. And look, I can't disaggregate that 667 figure, but in total, there have been 1,225 attacks involving dogs, and that includes attacks on persons, where the dog is set on a person, where the dog is set on a pet, or where the dog has been worrying or attacking livestock.
Okay.
And 1,005 of those attacks were resolved by the council without the need for further action. So you can see when they are investigated, that a number of these attacks would not be deemed to be sufficient or serious to warrant further investigation or prosecution. So of the 667, I would say it is likely that a number of those attacks maybe result in the allegation being unfounded, or the individuals coming to some sort of agreement that they don't think further action is required.
So I get all that. That's over there. So really specifically, if you're asking us for legislation to deal with XL bullying, it's off that 660, how many were serious attacks, and of those serious attacks, how many involved XL bully dogs? Yeah. And that should be in the domain of the councils. And it can't be that big, if just judging by the percentages you've just given us there, it can't be that big across the 11 councils. Maybe 5 or 6 or whatever it is in each council area, just judging by the percentages you've given.
I think to come in, I think some of the recent engagement with councils, and again, it's not the collated full portfolio of councils across Northern Ireland, but local councils would have shown that in recent times 16 attacks across 5 council areas were from XL bully type dogs, which have shown they've been serious enough to record the XL bully type dog as being responsible. I think with respect to the evidence base again of why we're asking and suggesting the SR is progressed, is if you look not just in terms of Northern Ireland's obviously a much smaller population than GB, but if you extrapolate out what has happened there and you look at the attacks and the fatalities that have happened over the past number of years there and the number of XL bully types dogs, and then you look at what has happened in Northern Ireland where they have doubled in licensed numbers since September, it shows that the risk is ever more increasing if you bring that across. So that's
I get that, concern. I get all that, but we're legislating for here, not GB. Yes. And just if there are figures there that underpin and support the legislation you're bringing forward, grand.
Yes.
It exists. It's just a matter of finding it. So
well, that's where I think in terms of, say, not all dog attacks are recorded as to the animal that attacked in Northern Ireland, and that is the case across.
Oh no, sorry, but Neil, we've already passed that bit.
Okay.
We've already determined that in serious cases they are taken in and they are recorded, and there's significant detail held to the councils. So that detail is bound to include the type of dog. I'd be very surprised if it wasn't. So, okay, thanks very much for that.
Okay, thank you, members. Just as a matter of query, I know that Anya was indicated, that she preferred this coming as positive resolution or affirmative. What would be the difference in the time scale of that, Neil?
The first issue, Chair, being truthfully honest, I don't know if it can be taken as affirmative. It's set up in the dog's order as a negative resolution instrument. So we'd honestly
under the primary legislation.
Yeah, under the primary legislation. So we'd have to take that away and seek legal views, to be quite honest, to see if it could be turned into an affirmative instrument. So that would be the first thing first, but it's set up in the legislation as a negative
legislation states that. Okay, that's a difficulty. Okay, well look, thank you very much for that, members. I think we're in a difficult position, I know that, and I think we're all agreed probably if we had our way we wouldn't be doing it this way, particularly in the breed specific issue, but we have heard from the officials in relation to obviously the public safety aspect of it. So I think we're all in a similar position, so I do need to ask where we are with it. I have to say, I suppose, Anya, personally, I'm just not as concerned about the JR in England, because that'll look after itself, whatever happens there will happen, but so I'm open to comments or proposals.
Sure. I would be in a more comfortable place to make a decision on that if we had that specific facts from the councils. It can be too hard to gather that up.
That's what I was going to suggest, maybe a deferral until you get that clarified.
And also obviously in relation to the affirmative resolution, whether that
we
can
get
be
a
part of that.
timescale on how long it would take to move it to affirmative as well, please.
Or if it can in the first instance. It may not be possible, going by what's been said, it may or it may not, but look.
Because I'm diligent that, or I'm aware, I think it's the 18th of June that it will come into force anyway.
Okay, well look, in light of that, I'm not going to ask for a vote, but would it be possible to come back by next week with maybe those couple of issues to us?
Yes, we of course, Chair.
Okay, that'll be
Yep.
fair. All right. Happy enough, members?
Good. Yep.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks, Neil and Christopher and Elsie. Thank you very much.
See you in a bit.
Okay, members, agenda item 7, SL1 Fisheries Act 2020, Scheme for Financial Assistance, Northern Ireland Regulations 2024. Refer you to pages 62 to 67 in your pack. Clerk's memo dated 13th of May 2024 is pages 62 to 63. And the SL1 Fisheries Act 2020 Scheme for Financial Assistance, Northern Ireland Regulations 2024 is at pages 64 to 67. This is the committee's opportunity to consider the policy set out in the SL1 and to note the SR is subject to draft affirmative resolution procedure in the Assembly. The purpose is to establish a scheme for the giving of financial assistance under the paragraph 3.1 of Schedule 6 of the Fisheries Act 2020. The financial assistance must be given in accordance with a scheme established by regulations, and such regulations are to be laid in draft and subject to affirmative resolution procedure. The aim is that the fisheries, aquaculture and seafood sectors and coastal communities will benefit from the introduction of the new scheme. Members, I can't answer any questions because I'm not an expert in it except what you see in the papers yourselves. But are you content that the draft SR be laid before the Assembly? It shall not be made unless and until affirmed by a resolution of the Assembly. Or do you want any further information? I'm broadly content myself.
I'm content.
Okay, all agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 8, SR 2024/93, the Climate Change Reporting Bodies Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. Refer you to pages 69 to 81 of your pack, which includes the clerk's memo, is at pages 69 to 70, and the climate change regulations are 71 to 81. Committee considered the SL1 at its meeting on the 11th of April and had no objection to the rule. There has been no change to the policy since then. The SR establishes a legislative framework that implements a reporting regime in Northern Ireland by placing climate change reporting duties on specified public bodies. In addition, Section 42 regulations of the Climate Change Act 2022 also place connected duties upon and provide powers for DAERA to perform certain functions, including in relation to the production of guidance and the publication of climate change reports that are received. Rule is subject to negative resolution procedure and has come into operation on the 3rd of May. Examiner of Statutory Rules stated that they had not drawn special attention to the Assembly under SO 43. Examiner of Statutory Rules noted to the Clerk that under Section 42.8 of the Climate Change Act Northern Ireland 2022, the first regulations made under this section must come into operation before the end of the period of 18 months, beginning with the day on which the Act received royal assent, which was the 6th of June 2022. So we're beyond that.
Yeah.
These regulations are the first made under Section 42, so they are a few months late. So this is the first ones, is that right?
Yes, the first set made under Section 42.
So we haven't met the targets. Okay. Okay, any questions? Points? No? If you're content, I'll put the motion that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs is considered SR 2024/93, Climate Change Reporting Bodies Regulations Northern Ireland 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Content? Thank you. Okay, need a comfort break for 2 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes.
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 20.
Back into public session, thank you. Agenda item 9 is the scrutiny of the draft executive budget for 2024-25. Refer you to pages 83-84 of your pack regarding the memo dated the 9th of May from the Clerk to the Committee for Finance regarding the scrutiny of the draft executive budget 2024-25. Finance Clerk has apologised for the tight response time, requesting a committee return by close of play tomorrow. This is due to the Finance Clerk needing to collate responses from committees into one report in time to make it available to all members for the vote on the budget schedule for the 20th of May. May wish to note that at our oral briefing from officials on DAERA budget is scheduled for the 6th of June. Refer you to pages 15 to 19 of your table papers, where the Clerk has drafted a response to our consideration, based on a number of sources, the information on bids and allocations sent to us by DAERA, the Fiscal Council assessment of the budget, which is at pages 20 to 49 of the table papers, and other issues we have already expressed concern about. I have to say, members, it's extremely unusual, this, where there's a draft budget. We're not getting a briefing on the budget until into June, but still we're debating it in the chamber beforehand, and they're looking for a response for us beforehand. It's just very, very unusual, and personally I don't know how you deal with that if they're going to have the budget debate. We need to just manage it. Now, whether there's going to be major changes anyway, probably not, I'd have thought. But I have to say, I've looked at, read the Clerk's summary and draft response, which is very comprehensive, I do have to say, and deals with, I think, most of the issues that we've looked at. So I'm open for comments, members.
Chair, could I
Sorry,
add something? I did speak to the DALO yesterday and again requested, was there anything that we could be sent in advance of the 28th of May? As I've mentioned in the report, I've been advised on a couple of occasions that while the department work through the allocations, they're not in a position to necessarily brief us until that date of the 6th of June. But I have gone back and asked, is there anything that could be sent to us in advance of that debate to help members on that?
Okay.
And Tom summarised where I took the information from for the draft. This is going to the Committee for Finance.
Yeah, it's quite difficult. Even when you look at the TB programme, how much short they've been from this year, and that's only one that stands out because it's an easily recognisable one. But
you also have Loch Ness interventions and likes of that too.
Yeah,
very important issues, and we're coming into the weather now where it's starting to show itself in the Loch.
But look, members, I'm not sure there's much more we can do at this stage. Really, what I'm just looking for at this stage is if there's any suggested amendments to the Clerk's response, or are we content with that response?
I have no amendments, no.
I've read through it myself, and I'm content with it. All okay with that then?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Because it has highlighted our frustrations as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you for that, members. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the House of Lords European Affairs Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework and Inquiry into Veterinary Medicines in the Windsor Framework. I refer you to pages 86 to 88 of your pack for the Clerk's memo dated the 7th of May, summarising the issues and the copied correspondence in your packet, pages 89 to 111, dated 30th of April 2024 from the Chair of the House of Lords EU Affairs Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework, the Right Honourable Steve Baker MP, Minister of State, regarding the Subcommittee's inquiry. The Subcommittee visited Northern Ireland at the end of January to hear from representatives of the sectors directly affected by the implementation of the EU rules. In fairness to them, they have actually highlighted some potential resolutions or solutions to help it, and that is the grandfather rule, the acceptance of marketing authorisation holders located in GB, and recognition of GB batch testing. There is a debate on this next week in the Chamber anyway, but has anybody any further comments to make? There's not much we can do about it at this stage anyway. But are you all content? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 11, legislation where the Secretary of State has not exercised discretion under Regulation 3 of the Windsor Framework Implementation Regulations 2024 not to exercise direction and control. Refer you to pages 113 to 118 of your pack. The following papers. The Clerk's memo was dated 13th of May at pages 113 to 115. A letter from the Department dated 23rd of April, pages 116 to 118. And the UK Government guidance on the regulations at pages 72 to 76 of the table of papers. Secretary of State anticipates exercising these powers only to the extent necessary to support the operation of the Windsor Framework, including relevant commitments to the safeguarding the Union Command Paper. Members, I have to say, I have read through some of those parts of legislation. They're very, very complex. From what I'm reading from that guidance document, it basically contradicts itself to me, because in some cases it's saying it's only dealing with aspects of the Windsor Framework of movement of goods between the jurisdictions, or between Northern Ireland and GB, vice versa. But once you read into the legislation, it seems to have overall control of various issues, particularly things like animal health. And I know the Minister has raised this on the floor on a couple of occasions. But I just think it's hugely misleading. Sorry, Michelle, I know you wanted in. No. Sorry, you'd raised the issue But to me, it's very, very difficult, and it undermines democracy, actually. But I think my key issue at the moment is to get clarity, because we don't have that clarity. And I had a discussion with the Minister yesterday, actually, at the show about it. And he says he's extremely frustrated. He does say he is contacted and written to, I'm not sure whether it's DEFRA or the Secretary of State, I'm assuming it's the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, to try to have this resolved quickly. I'm sure other departments are impacted as well, and I do think it's a matter that does need resolved, because what concerns me in that guidance as well is it says it'll, I don't think these are the exact words, but it'll be reviewed in 2 years' time. We'll all be blocking the motorways by that. Yeah. Sorry, John. Yeah.
So a quick point on that. I know Michelle indicated some concern around this earlier as well, but look, apart from anything else, not to re-rehearse old arguments, that there's been uncertainty over these issues since 2016 as people were waiting to find a way forward, and all of the outworkings of the changes made then by referendum, and wherever anybody stood on that at that time is not relevant in this context. The importance here is the uncertainty for these sectors, and that, you know, making progress in so many things can be undermined if people don't know where fundamental decision making is going to sit, and that's the bit we need to take clarification on.
Well, I take your point from there's been issues from 2016, but this is more specific. This clearly defines areas that are the responsibilities held by the Secretary of State and not by our devolved ministers.
Yeah, and I'm pointing that out because if there's prevailing uncertainty for the sector we deal with most, but any sector, then those are the things that need to be clarified, and that's what I'm making them. You know, I'm not saying that other than there's been a lot of uncertainty and awaiting decisions since a period of over a period of 8 years, and there needs to be absolute clarification on this. Now, my sense is that people are desperately keen to see that clarification.
Right, William first, and then Anya, did you?
I know we're overriding to maybe different areas, but we discussed in the situation where the Minister said that he wasn't responsible for TB. The Minister made that statement in the Chamber the other day. I think the Minister jumped the gun on that. I think he was wrong. I think my information is that the Northern Ireland office took a different view than the Minister. I'm told there's correspondence in relation to that. Also, I have an email I'm looking at here from the Windsor Framework team, and they're clear that that's not the case. So there's somebody wrong somewhere. It looks like the Minister jumped the gun on this, made a mistake.
Well, that's my very point, William, is that there is huge confusion around this. And I've tried to outline that. Well, the Minister believes one thing, and
if he's been told by Northern Ireland Office and been told by other people that that's not the case, why does he make a statement to be sure? Statements shouldn't be made to the House unless you're sure of the facts.
All that needs clarity, Michelle. Yeah, but take your point. Yeah.
Yeah, Willie's sort of taken my point in many respects and explored that, but I put in a simple question to the Minister, just asking about the number of herd and animal TB instances in my own constituency, and he came back and said that as a consequence of this, that he no longer had responsibility, so therefore wouldn't share the data. Now, clearly DAERA still has that data, and if we're asking simple questions in relation to the number of outbreaks, regardless of the confusion in relation to this, that information should still be shared with members, and I'm pretty confident that probably if everybody puts a similar question, that they'll then get the same response. So, I don't know whether he's playing some politics around this, but, that's not helpful either. Although in saying that, there could be a silver lining in all this, because if the Secretary of State has responsibility now for TB, maybe he might move forward with the eradication strategy and maybe sort it out. But regardless, we still need to get some clarification, and he does need to share information with us whenever we're asking for it, because it could be in relation to any outbreak, and if he then refuses then to share information for us, then that keeps us in the dark.
Yeah, just a quick point from me, Chair, and I think I agree largely with everybody's sentiment so far. Would it be possible for us to write both the Minister and the Secretary of State highlighting the issue of the issue around devolution, and at any stage or at some stage will these issues eventually be devolved to DAERA? I think you said, Chair, it was 2 years the Secretary of State will look at this again.
I think it's seen in guidance 2 years mentioned somewhere.
Chair, yes, there'll be an official review in 2 years. I met with the lead DAERA official yesterday just to try and understand it a bit better myself for the Clerk's memo. And she is willing to come, obviously, and brief the committee from their perspective. But the understanding I got from her yesterday was that really, if we were to ask questions, our route should still be the same. It's just that the Minister may need additional clearance from the Secretary of State on those issues before the information is released. But I certainly didn't get the impression that the information wouldn't come, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
So, Leonie, were you finished?
That's me,
there is a serious divergence of opinion in this, I believe, from what the Minister's saying and what I'm hearing from William and Michelle.
I have a paragraph I could read out to you, but
Chair, can I have it clarified if we're discussing an assembly question on an issue, albeit accepting an extremely important issue, or the list of 19 separate areas that are before me on the agenda, and whether or not the Secretary of State has issued or exercised discretion on those? Because we seem to be moving from, and I'm not negating the importance of the issues that the members are raising, but I'm keen, the clarification I'm talking about is on a 19 long list range of issues, on my table papers for this committee, and not in relation
rigorous implementation of the protocol, John.
Not in relation to. I hope
Hold on, members. Let me clarify then, John.
Okay.
If that's fair. What I'm saying is those 19 issues and the issues contained within them. I think what William and Michelle has rightly pointed out is that whenever they go to the Minister to ask for queries, he's basically saying, maybe not in so many words, but he did say it on the House, in the floor, that because of these 19 issues, he can't respond to those particular aspects. And I take it that's what William and Michelle are both indicating. Now, they're just using those questions as a means. Now, just to say, before you read anything out, William, I'll let you read it out, certainly. There is a serious divergence of views on this between the Minister and the UK government, because I have some correspondence as well. Maybe it's the same as William's, I don't know. But go on ahead, William, you read that out.
Well, I'll maybe not read it out, but it is in essence saying that there's clearly a difference of opinion between the UK government and DAER on this, because it's clear from them that the local minister and the chief vet has control of TB and other issues. So I can't understand why the minister makes a statement to the House saying he is no longer in control without being sure of his facts. That's the issue, I think, for the committee. I think we need to.
Well, I think first that's a slightly separate issue. We're dealing with the 19 issues. That's a separate issue, and that if the Minister has misled the Assembly.
Not saying he's misled it.
Yeah, but I think we need to deal firstly. Our view is, I'm not making any judgment on that, because I'm not sure whether the Minister's interpretation is correct or the Northern Ireland Office interpretation is correct, because there is clearly two different views, William. And
I'm told by this correspondence from the Northern Ireland Office that will confirm that.
I will accept that you have, but we have also a different view from the Minister on this point. And I have to say, when I read into the legislation, it does appear that they are exercising control over those diseases, because it clearly lists the diseases of which TB is one. So I think we do need to get to the bottom of this.
Absolutely.
And as well as, I'm happy if we invite the official from DAERA, but I also think we need an official from the NIO to explain their position, because I'm telling you, there's a clear difference of opinion between what the Minister believes and the Department believes and what the Northern Ireland Office believes.
Obviously, we resolved fairly quickly because the Minister's wrong in this one.
Sorry?
The Minister seems to be clearly wrong.
Yes, the Minister's wrong from the Northern Ireland Office's viewpoint.
No, from more than that, from the Windsor Framework 3.2.
Okay, well look, we're happy to debate that if that's what you believe, but I do think we need officials here to explain this, and I think we should ask the DAERA official, but we should also get an official from the NIO as well, or at least ask them, because they'll put forward an alternative view that Williams. Is that fair?
No, aye.
Okay, and
our driver is, Chair, of course, very clearly.
Sorry, John?
Our driver is, of course, very clearly that the clarification is needed for sector consumers and others, quite frankly, and not only ourselves.
Would it be possible, Chair, to get them in together?
You can ask.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good idea, because in these situations you bring them in one day, another day, they'll dance in the head of a pin.
Yeah.
Whereas if you put it, well, what's your right? Yeah. Who's right here? You know.
Then we can get a legal advisor there as well.
Because to me this is a very, very serious issue at the moment, and you know, if the Minister's interpretation is right, it seriously undermines devolution. If the NIO's position is right, then the Minister needs to start assuming responsibility for all of those issues again.
Yes.
That he's saying that he doesn't have responsibility for.
Or maybe due to interpretation of function. There may be one type of function with one body and another type of function oversight with another. For different reasons. But anyway, that's for them to explain.
Okay. You happy enough, William and Michelle, with that?
Yep.
It's fine. I think it's important that we get answers.
Yeah. We know, absolutely. All right, well, thank you very much for that, members. Not the easiest one, but... Okay, where are we now? Sorry. Okay, we're on to correspondence, agenda item 12. Refer you to correspondence memo in your packs, which is page 120, and the correspondence is 120 to 166 in the pack, and pages 78 to 96 in the table of papers. A couple of issues that I'll draw your attention to just. 12.2, correspondence from the Northern Ireland Sheep Industry Task Force, dated 2nd of May 2024, pages 122 to 147, setting out the task force vision for the industry and the challenges it faces. Happy enough with that. 12.3, correspondence from the Northern Ireland Fish Producers Organisation, dated the 3rd of May, and it's at pages 148 to 149 of your pack, outlining a proposed solution to blue-green algae using a chemical called chitosan, is that the proper terminology? Extracted from prawn shell waste. The organisation are now connected with an American company who produce the product through a green chemistry method. It is used in the proprietary products to treat algae blooms caused by runoff, and they are currently treating the Great Lakes in America, an area that's 600 times the size of Loch Ness. Members, if this was a runner, it would be a huge issue. Anybody any comment on it? Or anybody know anything more about it?
I could suggest I know the Minister indicated that they were setting up an SBRI project to look at proposals such as this. It'll be important that, now, I can't judge one way or another whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, whatever it seems to be presented as a useful thing. But it'll be helpful, in the first instance, drawing this to the attention of the department, so that they're aware of this.
They are aware.
They are aware of it?
Yeah.
Well, could we maybe then write and ask them for their view on it?
Yes.
Their update?
There you go. Yeah.
I think maybe I passed another one on. I don't know how we got a response to
John.
Sorry.
And to what extent they're considering it.
Yeah. Can we maybe wait for that? There is a request from Northern Ireland Fish Producers Organisation to brief us before we go to Kilkeel. But can we wait maybe for the response from Deirdre? Sorry, Michelle. Yeah.
Maybe a bit more information, obviously, and I've met with Harry and talked about this, and it's quite an exciting option really to look at the byproduct from prawns. And obviously they've been looking at options around this, and obviously they put forward a bid, and they've been working alongside Deirdre and Queen's University in order to see whether or not this can be extracted from the shells. Alongside that, obviously working with this American company who use, I think maybe they're using sort of crab or cray shells maybe, and obviously the solution it's worked out very well, and they're seeing really positive results. I know that also Harry's going to be having conversations with the Loch Ness Partnership and others around how this then could work for Loch Ness. So I suppose the two phases in this would be about introducing, I suppose, the American company in the short term, and then in the longer term then actually for our own harbours then to be able to produce this product, so that it means that you're basically having a circular economy within Northern Ireland, because at the moment our shells are obviously going to Killybegs to get incinerated, so there are really good opportunities around this, around particularly the circular economy, so it'd be useful to have the conversation with them.
Well, look, we'll see what we get back from the department. We'll ask them for some information, and maybe we'll provisionally put Harry in for the 6th of June, depending on what we get back. Is that fair? Okay, thank you, members. Refer you to correspondence dated the 7th of May 2024, pages 153 to 156 of your pack, from the Senior Assistant Assembly Clerk to the Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee, detailing the impact the lack of veterinary medicines has on animal health and welfare in Northern Ireland. We did discuss this earlier. Don't know whether I want to make any more comment. No. Oh, is there one? Oh, sorry, apologies, missed one here. Copied correspondence dated the 7th of May 2024, pages 150 to 152 of your pack, from Senior Assistant Assembly Clerk to the Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee, from an individual seeking clarity on regulations around regulations around travelling between Northern Ireland and Scotland with pets. Are you content that we write to the Department requesting that the officials check to ensure the advice on its website is accurate and up to date for those travellers in this regard regarding pet vaccinations? As ferry companies are referring people to the DAERA website, or has anybody any other views on this?
That's fine.
Okay, happy enough. Okay, members, there's the 13th report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules dated 10th of May 2024, pages 159 to 166 of your pack. There's nothing relevant to this committee. Correspondence dated 10th of May 2024 in the table papers 78 to 80 from the Clerk to the Committee for the Economy regarding utility regulator varies, consumers and net zero regarding challenges to achieve net zero climate targets. Economic Committee has now written to Minister Muir regarding how he is working with the executive colleagues on achieving the targets. Maybe just if the Economy Committee would keep us up to date with that, that's probably all we can do. Also pages 81 to 88 in the table papers regarding the 14th report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, where they considered SR 2024/93, the Climate Change Reporting Bodies regulations, but they didn't draw any special attention to it. Correspondence dated 14th of May 2024 in your table papers 89 to 91 regarding an uplift of marine licensing fees by 6.1% for the financial year. Section 67 of the Marine and Coastal Access Act 2009 gives DAERA the power to prescribe a fee for the determination of an application for marine licence. Marine licensing fees are set out in the Marine Licensing Application Fees Regulations Northern Ireland 2011. Work is underway to develop a consultation for the Minister's consideration on increasing the marine licensing fees to achieve full cost recovery. Consultation will also seek views on proposals to increase a range of marine licensing services for which DAERA can charge via the Financial Provisions Bill. The committee will receive a copy of the consultation. Any views at this stage, or just wait for the consultation? Okay. Correspondence dated the 14th of May 2024 in your table papers at 92 to 93. That the Department for Business and Trade intend to lay the Product Safety and Marketing Surveillance Northern Ireland Consequential Amendment, etc. Regulation 2024. Content to note. Correspondence dated the 14th of May 2024 in table papers 94 to 96. DEFRA has now published a summary of the responses to the UK-wide consultation on contractual relationships with the UK eggs industry. This is a DEFRA piece of legislation. Am I right, Clerk, that because it's
regulation of contractual relations is a reserved
it's
matter?
A reserved matter because it's a contractual issue? Happy to note.
Yeah.
Okay, members, have we any other business? No? Okay, thank you. Date, time and place of the next meeting is Thursday the 23rd of May, this day week at 10 a.m. in room 21. Okay, members, we'll now go into private session for the strategic planning session.
Committee Room 21. Sound.